Okay. Alrighty. We're all ready to get started. How's everyone doing today? Nice
We do that soft thing again? Like,
I mean, I was just wondering how people are doing. Yeah, where are y'all at?
Short minute.
Short minute.
Good. Yeah.
smile.
Yeah, exactly. I got high hopes.
If we want, we can still do like a one-word check-in. If we want, we can do like a one-word check-in stuff before we like jump into. I know I already started a live stream, but if anyone wants.
Good. Yeah, good. Alright, no. Every single time I see you, you only wear sweatpants. Like, this
I was gonna wear shorts, but it's the weather.
I was curious. I was like, I've never seen you in not sweatpants.
I swear, it's the weather.
I think that
Yeah,
it's
it's the weather. Trust me.
Okay.
okay, so that's what it is. Okay.
And they're always gray sweatpants too.
Right? I'm black.
Sounds like you gotta switch it up, right?
Okay. Okay. So no, Michael, myself in prison. Cool. Good form.
All right.
Yeah, we said Tanya had an event that she's at right now until 6:30 or 7 that she has to go to for class. Megan is at an awards dinner, so she's going to be late. I think she said she could be here around 6. And I can't remember if Hannah told me why she was going to be late or not. But I'm about to text her and find out. So, I guess. Okay, can you pull up the minutes from last week, Nova? Okay.
Megan had a point to make.
Right, yeah.
I was a little confused about what she meant. Because we had a conversation with David. I don't know exactly what she said off the top of my head, but
Okay.
she did have a point to make.
Did she say?
Because just wanted to make a quick comment.
Yeah.
The eligibility part.
Yeah, there was a part, I think, in the discussion of the changes to the Constitution last week about the changes to the ineligibility part of the Constitution that I don't know if were like accurately reflected in the minutes. If we go to that part of the minutes, talking about the constitutional changes, so yeah, that section.
Was it what she said, or was the whole topic?
I think it was before that. Like, I think she was just saying like there wasn't much included about like that conversation explaining why, like, the significance of the changes in the ineligibility part.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm not seeing a whole lot there about that.
So if there was a part that
About this.
Yeah.
Very
They're like
weird.
right in. Yeah.
I'll be putting off.
Putting off the
Actually,
date.
if we don't approve the minutes from last meeting, are we allowed to meet today?
Yeah.
Okay. So
Yeah.
in that case, then let's just hold off on it. See if we can get some additional clarification next week.
Yeah, I feel like it'd also be better to have Megan here for this conversation to kind of clarify what she meant by that.
Sorry about the meeting? Can we do that?
Yeah, I think we could probably do that by the end of this meeting.
Okay.
If we want to revisit it. Yeah. Okay. What else? Alright, so we only have one organization to look at for general consent, and then we're only looking at Cooking Club, who will be coming in today at I think 6:30? 6. So,
Now
yeah,
we
hello. Okay, so this is for what's the name? Right?
Stilettos.
Oh, stilettos.
And can someone remind me if the Stilettos are a restricted funding organization?
Yeah, we don't have this one. Yeah. Okay. They are requesting marketing just to advise that they're inviting all students and students to the event itself as well. These are pretty standard fees. Yeah? Is there something you wanted to add, or you can just?
I was going to leave
Okay.
Move to approve the speaking law
Good. Okay. Alright, then motion to approve stilettos for $1,277. All members for? Zero against, 0 abstaining, 2 abstaining.
What's that?
So just for the record, we approve because all this stuff is usually
Yeah.
standard.
Well, I feel like Carla said it.
Yeah.
Oh, you said it?
Well, yeah, I was just talking about the request. I didn't know if anyone else wanted to jump in, and then you just wanted to.
Yeah, and even despite the organization being a limited funding organization, the concert is targeted at the wider UMBC audience, and I feel it provides a valuable addition to UMBC campus.
Also, although you didn't ask, David Lawyer has said that you have the money to fund the request that you have before you tonight.
Wow,
So have enough money.
we got cash money, y'all.
Can you repeat
know-
that? I'm sorry. What did you say?
So David Lawyer continues to go through the events that you've already made allocations to try and determine if there's money that has not been spent or will not be spent. And so each week he can get closer and closer to the present day doing that. So since the last meeting, he has found more money that will not be spent than you have in requests tonight. Wonderful.
And I know you guys did this story because there's no more allegations.
So what do we do with that money?
That money will ultimately enter the SGA reserve and will be used by future SGAs for the benefit of the student body.
Very well.
Yes,
Wait, so tonight's all the requests for the rest of the year?
Yeah, so we initially set an April 10th deadline that was supposed to be sent out in the April newsletter, which is like a memo that all student organizations get, but that message wasn't translated in that newsletter, so then we changed the deadline to April 17th for this fiscal year. And then for next fiscal year, we'll be starting July 1st. So if organizations wanted to submit requests for events happening after July 1st, they could, and we could allocate, but that would come out of next fiscal year's budget, but no one submitted. And the deadline for that was today at 5:30. So these are all the allocation requests for the rest of the semester.
David, for clarification, just because I'm going to see, what is the status of that one equipment request?
I forwarded it to Simon, who has it and was busy working on it this weekend. It's not working on his
Okay, I guess because my question is that like surprise another request, or should I just not bother really for this year? Because it would benefit the organization greatly to have stuff that we don't have to reboot every night because it overheats now because it's been running too long.
What are we talking about?
WMBC has an equipment request that's been in since last spring.
which has been updated, right?
We've been updating it as we go through, as things change, because we've been asked for updates mostly. I would have, even if we had just done the initial version, that would be fine. But
So my suggestion is let's resolve the issues with Simon, and then in light of both a fuller explanation of the context of the finance board and also a consideration of how much money there is available, the finance board can consider whether to interpret the situation as this is a request that was submitted a year ago.
Okay, alright. Fair enough. So what those are done though, so cooking club budget for
Yeah,
consideration.
so-
down.
What do you think?
I see the budget, actual budget.
This is the budget.
Relevant in a sense.
I'm
I think as-
requesting baking materials for the next cooking session, which will most likely be like next Friday.
I think in the same way as the last time they requested this, I would welcome them giving us any kind of fundraising activity.
We mentioned that, as you mentioned, they would go hard next semester or next year and fundraising. I think it's that's a good question to ask about how's that going. Are there any plans that are in motion for fundraising?
And like what they're planning on doing with the baked goods. Like are they gonna keep them
Leave
all
the
or,
leftovers?
yeah, or like sell them? Because if they were to sell them, then would we be in essence like funding a fundraiser?
Yeah, I'm sorry, you just yeah. So yeah, that's really important to ask, like how these grants, like if we were to fund this, would we be funding like the making of the sweets or the baked goods? And like which then get used for a fundraiser, or is it like a fundraiser, or what's the difference? And I think being
How would you structure that question?
Huh?
How would you structure?
So one thing to think about is how can we, let's assume they say we're going to sell them. You want the finance board then have the conversation we need to have about what that means without the organization feeling like organizations sometimes do being really judged or that they've done something wrong.
Yeah, I feel like we first should frame it as like, while the finance board is here to support all student boards, the finance board doesn't fund like the actual fundraiser part of student organizations, and like we can't solely. So I feel like framing it in that context justifies asking what happens to make those happen. So like we just need to know.
We can say that the student activity fee that is being distributed through the student organization allocations line is earmarked for a particular purpose, and we've evaluated this request with respect to those guidelines. And if that money is used then to create money that is unrestricted by that purpose, then it would be falling afoul of the guidelines that were used to allocate you the money in the first place. That's at least how I would put it.
Let's put it a bit more direct, I think. We say the policy, we explain to them this, and like we just need to ensure that finance board money, because of that reason, cannot go towards fundraising efforts. And then let them clarify what they'll do with it. If they've said they were planning to do with that, we'll let them know, oh, well, we can't fund you at that. We can't allow funding for that, or something like that. Or we'll just tell them, if you are planning to do it fundraising-wise, we have to provide them different alternatives. These cannot be used to stipulate what the money's for. Don't need to say too many words for them.
I don't necessarily think that that's the wrong outcome, but I think the issue is more complicated.
Okay.
Because you fund fundraisers all the time, right? You don't fund organizations that say they want to convert SGA's money into carryover money. You wouldn't do that, and you shouldn't do that. But you also allow organizations to put on events at which they're charging people who are not students and to keep the money that they collect.
Yeah.
So it's not as though SGA money never gets translated into carryover money.
So primary, primary, yeah, but whatever like the primary usage of the funds cannot be for the primary.
The question then is this money for a fundraiser because they're selling the brownies, or is this money for an activity that happens as a byproduct to produce something that...
Yeah, so that's the same thing as an event then. It's an event for the entertainment and education needs.
Yeah,
Find this by the side. Find this
ask the
side.
question, what's going to happen to the baked goods after the event, and then if the answer is fundraising, we could just preface discussion with, right now we're going to discuss how each like board member feels this money is being used. Like, is it being used to give students an experience to learn how to bake, or is it used primarily as a fun?
One option that you have and they want to consider too is, when you have a conversation with organizations about whether they're charging UMBC students, you're making that a condition of the grant of your money, right? If an organization says, yeah, we want to charge students $5, and say, well, we're not going to give you the money to do that. But if you make admission free, then we'll fund your event. So you could say here, we will fund you as long as you do not sell the products. You can eat them or you can give them away, but you cannot sell them.
Oh, okay, so that's it.
Yeah, and then
Meeting adjourned.
no, we also have to go over the budget because the news voted on in the Senate last night.
Yep. Looks like it passed.
So there's that, and then there's also the mid-year adjustments.
Yes, and like in part of like the budget proposal, there were proposed changes to this fiscal year to amend the stipend for the election board chair and the election board members, where the chair's position would be changed from like 878 now to like 1,000, whatever it is.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the election board members pot that's equally distributed to all the members of the election board is changed to 2,200. Those are changes made by the Senate last week, and it went through the safeguard again. And I went to that presentation on Friday, and everything seemed fine. Yeah, so those changes were made in the Senate last night, and Josh Walsh will be coming in to talk a little bit more about it.
Pretty much has like a one pager on like what each, like what was changed.
Yeah, he does.
Sure.
Huh?
I said we talked on Thursday, so.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I completely understand.
Okay.
Pretty much outlined it. Which was really cool.
Okay. And everyone else kind of went over the budget. Did you guys go over it with Josh? Okay. We'll go in later, Josh. And then basically, other than that, I also wanted to take some time to review kind of, actually brought the poster boards of like the goals and like things that we had set in our special meeting in December, and I wanted us to kind of revisit those, and then just like kind of have a more like open conversation about like things that have changed over this year, and like what we've noticed, how we've improved or not improved, and kind of reflecting on that. And then we talked about reflection, thinking of like transitioning into next year and like how to fill that knowledge gap and like where to start with that. So yeah, so we'll have that discussion later. So I hope you guys are kind of thinking of those questions that I posed in the email I sent last night. So, other than that, pretty much done.
Would it be worthwhile to get started on the budget since we've got 10 minutes? And we have a budget expert currently in the room.
True. Yeah, I don't know if we really need to Josh, but isn't it going to take more than 10 minutes so then we just
I mean, it didn't seem to take more than 10 minutes last week. So I would be interested in what changed was this year.
I mean,
That just my opinion. We don't need to.
I took a look at the finance board procedural rules that you're required to approve the minutes by the end of the meeting. And that's from last week.
That's what I thought, yeah.
Okay. So yeah, I think Megan should be coming back in soon and hopefully comments about it. We want to revisit that.
Could somebody add that to the agenda then before adjournment? Some of you guys had access.
Yeah, I can do it.
Thank you.
We're required to approve the minutes for the end.
Yeah, to prevent them from piling up.
Or they're considered approved automatically.
What are we doing at the end?
Megan mentioned something about.
Oh, she wanted to.
Yeah, she wanted to go back and it was a change in her weight.
Okay.
Did anyone go to the Senate meeting last night?
Nope.
I did not go either. I think it was actually. Did you want to speak on, I guess, if there were any changes or discussion before the vote on the budget? I know there was a lot of discussion about the budget last week and about any changes to it.
There were a couple of changes that came out of the SAFRB meeting, but I think it actually makes sense to have Josh in the room to explain them.
Okay. Yes.
Can you up scheduling, please?
What's that?
Scheduling.
Yeah.
That one's like my phone. How much time? 8 minutes to do of that. Wonderful.
We don't really have to include the Stilettos concert if that's not already on there. And I guess when cooking club studies, that's just in their Friday general body meetings.
So I'm seeing Stilettos.
Yeah, there's a left
And cooking club is,
up there.
I've got a week 7 here for the May 11th. Do we have another one?
No.
The May 7th one is the newest one.
The May 11th one is the one we approved last week, right?
Mm-hmm.
Isn't the request that came in just this week? Is week 7 funding request up? It was in week 11, right? Can you open up the other document?
I mean, I can.
Yeah, because like the title, I think the title of the allocation request as the name.
Yeah, this was week 7. Browning was week 7.
Yeah, the Browning one, week 7. So they didn't put the last one in. Would have passed anyways, so.
Like music theater club curtains event is this Friday. Yeah, this weekend, I guess.
You can also start reflection, or somebody can go and check the cooking club's already up there. We do ask them to come like 5 minutes early, don't we?
Who's there? You get the minutes done instead? Hello. Congrats on the awards.
Thank you.
I should use her tomorrow.
Yeah, our case tomorrow. I just printed my poster today.
What was up there?
So that last one was supposed to be for their first 2 cooking sessions. So we probably should put it in there for both of them. I don't know when those sessions are.
Oh,
So-
every Friday. Every other Friday.
Yeah.
I'm not really sure like what else I can do other than like talk to the support team members and ask them to add the events and then just not say anything. But I guess I did it for last week.
I do that.
You did it for last week?
Yeah.
When did we see them? The
The cooking club?
Yeah.
April 10th, yeah.
we said we funded for the next 2 years. We probably funded the 13th Cousin Club meeting and the 27th.
Yeah, I'm not very much about it.
Out of the club.
Okay.
I went to Sasa.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, the banquet?
No,
Oh,
it's just
Mr.
that.
Sasa.
It's funny. I had a good time.
Oh, yeah.
I had a good time.
Yeah, I went to that too. I had to leave after half an hour.
Yeah.
So I couldn't stay the whole time. You went to Tourette too. I went to Tourette. Is that up there? Yeah, it should be.
Yeah.
You go first if you want to.
We already did some, we did this last week, right?
We're just gonna go through anything that updated
Yeah.
because we're not adding anything else new.
Here's Monday night and Mr. Sauce.
It was just Monday night, Mr. Sauce.
How do you go?
I didn't go to midnight. It was still out. Yeah.
Did they not let you in?
I thought I was setting up around 5, but. I was like. I had to go to class.
Oh, this is something we were in sports on.
Yeah, it was fun. A lot of humor. There's some technical difficulties here and there, but overall, the event was really fun.
I feel like that's happened a couple times in the sports zone. At least when SEB does their like
Oh,
events
okay.
and stuff like that,
Okay.
like the audio visual.
Audio and visual.
It's like I don't know what it is with that space, but that tends to have technical difficulties.
Okay.
Rather.
What technical difficulties did they have?
They had trouble getting the videos up for who the nominees were for the times the audio was scratchy here and there, but other than that, it was like it was mostly in the beginning when that happened. But during the middle and towards the end, they like picked up and it was fun.
Oh, we have curtains in, by the way. Whoever's putting curtains in right now.
I'm going with curtains.
Me too.
It's in line 93.
Was that on early?
Here.
Oh.
I got it. And do we remember what we funded the SASA for in terms of tech? How much did we pay for tech?
That was the third. I think it was on the third, first week of April.
Yeah.
Because I guess my thing is, if we're going to pay for technical services and pay them to an exclusive provider, then they should be good. And if we're paying for them, then
But
we should follow up.
Carly mentioned it was in the sports zone. Like, is it specifically the sports zone, Carly, or is
Yeah,
it
there
like
was another. Yeah, there was like an SEB movie.
$123.
So do we have to keep in mind of where they're hosting the event? Is that what
Yeah, but I
We
mean,
should,
it's also
but I think we
like,
can also hold commons to maintaining their space as well. Because
Yeah.
you do
Yeah.
pay a mandatory fee for those spaces to be good.
Okay.
so maybe just something to worry about.
So,
Yeah, we paid $422 for
How many?
$423, which is, it doesn't say which version of tech that is, but I think that's small production, if I remember correctly. Which means that there should be a commons tech there the whole, was there a commons tech there the whole time?
in the beginning, yes, there was.
Yeah.
I think it left. Michael's sister?
Oh.
Yep. Good luck. Send me one.
Do you need anything? I don't know if you need like information or anything, or if you just wanted to. Sorry. Let's start off with introductions, and then you can just go around and you can explain kind of what your request is here, what you're requesting here. You already kind of did this a couple weeks ago, so you know how this goes. My name is Carly. I'm the chair of the finance board. My preferred pronouns are she.
So, Madam Secretary.
Can all clients were represented from?
And that is your treasurer. I am Megan, I'm the vice president of stabilization. She has words.
Inside out, actually. Sorry, it was raining.
Oh, you're okay.
Tola Boo, president of the club.
Nova Observer.
David from Campus Life.
Daniel, Vice President Finance Party, yes.
Dr. Cam Observer. Michael, Finance Partners.
All right, if you kind of want to go right ahead.
Hey guys, so today I'm requesting the money for food for the rest of the semester for my club. We have 3 weeks left until this Friday, and I did send one of these budget forms. One of them I sent to be reviewed last week, but my handler told me that it was a few days late, and I understood that. And I was able to manage the money that we had before, and I also moved that request to today along with the other requests I had, so that would be in a timely manner.
Okay. So you mentioned something about you moved one request today and then another. Is the one pulled up behind you the only thing you're requesting today?
No, there's one, I believe it's called weeks 3 through 6.
Okay.
That was the one I requested. The one I said I requested a couple days late, but that was like at the beginning of April.
Okay. Was that sent? Do you still have that quote?
I'll have my laptop with me.
What are you, could you elaborate on what you're saying right now?
So I had a request that I sent in with along with my treasurer at the beginning of the month, and the day that was sent in, it would have been 13 days from last week, and Hannah told me about that, and I know that the minimum is 15, so I asked for that specific request to be moved to today.
Which I told you wouldn't be possible.
Told you what?
Which I told you, if you go to the thread, I said wouldn't be possible and that we would only be able to vote on the brownie request.
All right.
Yeah, I can pull up that email thread if you want, but it's all in the thread.
Okay.
So,
Right now, we're just discussing this brownie request.
All right.
And we will not be able to vote on the 335 because of the deadline policy.
All right.
so I guess for the brownie request, what do you plan to use with the brownies after the event? Or like what is kind of?
Well, it's to teach the students about the basics of like baking and adding salt to food, even though it's not savory.
Okay. So what will happen to the brownies after?
They're gonna be eaten.
Just wanted to double check. And the reason why I asked is, like, we didn't know if you were baking them for a particular fundraiser for your organization, because in that case, we kind of have be stuck in a more sticky situation of like funding something that is used for the fundraiser of your own organization, which Finance Board doesn't fund like the actual fundraising of an organization itself.
It's not being used for fundraising.
Okay, so. Other questions, I guess?
Honestly, that's the big one.
Okay, yes, Nova?
So last time we saw your organization, we had some questions about your fundraising strategies and your ability to support some of these activities for club members by the activities of the club members. So can you give us an update on what fundraising activities you made to date?
Last week was a little bit hectic because we kind of had to rush to get all our food, and it was election day. I didn't really have a lot of time to discuss that with my members because I had to go to the Orioles game pretty much right after our meeting ended. I really didn't have a lot of time to discuss that, but I will talk about that possibility this Friday.
Yeah, and so So we just asked that like you guys are like striving to like set up a more sustainable like method for like obtaining food and ingredients for your club to use throughout next year. Yep.
All my questions have been answered.
Okay. So yeah.
No, I have a question. So what are your plans, like long term, for next semester to be unsustainable?
Like you guys said, one option could be to have the members help pay for food themselves, maybe like a little sum of money at the beginning of the semester. And I also had an interview with Giant at one of the fairs last 2 weeks ago, and planning on setting up a connection with them.
So how often do you anticipate to submit like learning requests next year?
I think I would have probably 2 or 3 meetings next semester, but that might be reduced because of the methods that we'd be able to fund ourselves with.
Okay, if there aren't any more questions, first we'll move into a period of discussion with just finance board members.
So I would vote to fully fund this organization as a new organization, and we should be providing support to new student organizations. Of course, we do want to stipulate to the next finance board coming in how the cooking club has promised to find alternative sources of funding to become self-sustaining. I want to pass that down in a note. But at its current state, I see no reason why this should not pass.
Wait, what was that last part? Sorry.
I do not see a reason why it should not pass right now.
Oh. I agree. I think it's just better ingredients for them to fulfill the purpose of their club. They're only eating the brownies afterwards, which I'm okay with. Because that's the activity we want to fund anyway. So.
Move to approve.
Okay. The total is
$33.93.
for the motion to approve cooking club for $33.93, all members for. Okay. Members for, 0 against, 0 abstaining, 1 absent. All right, you've been fully funded. So you'll receive an email by the end of the week about how to access your funds in SABSC right across the hall. We also have a little photo card here for you. Celebrating Boards is next Wednesday, right? In the student learning space. Please sign up to come. It would be great. It's just kind of a party with all the organizations. So
I think I already signed up for this.
awesome. Thank you. All right. Have a good night.
And Tola,
Yep.
you're going to get an email from me with the finance board guidelines. I know that you got it last time, but just as another reminder, pay close attention to those guidelines because you will be held accountable for them. Okay?
All right.
Thank you for coming in.
Where's Josh?
He's at the most right now.
Found the recess. Are we finding Josh?
How long is he there?
No idea, but we gotta find him right away.
Does he need to present it, or can
I do like Hannah could also present it, but Josh was also there at the Senate meeting last night when changes were made, so I think it's valuable to have him here co-presenting as well. So it's been repeated for him to come. But yeah, I guess we just have a recess until 6:15.
UC Berkeley, I went to a squirrel as part of their SGA Senate.
Ooh. Chick-fil-A squirrels for Senate.
It was a student that like campaigned as furry boy and like put a squirrel costume on.
Furry boy.
You know, I.
Good work here as well.
It beats 17. I don't even know if you have it. Oh, really? So quick. She definitely needs to move it today. So.
Okay, so Josh is not going to be able to come for like another like 10-15 minutes or so. So I was hoping if we did actually just, well, we already did scheduling, but if we wanted to start.
The minutes.
Oh, yeah. Because I know I did.
Over the minutes.
Sorry, what? Oh, the minutes? Yeah,
Where was it? What part?
yeah, I think it was at the beginning, because I remember asking about I believe it was about the ineligibility part, but I didn't see it on there. Because I know I asked David a few questions, mainly points of clarification.
Right.
That I think helped all of us understand a bit better, like what was happening. But I just didn't see it in there.
Do you want to go back to the live stream?
I went back to the live stream, but I know I heard myself say it. I'm going to say.
I think it's in between the part of like where I'm first speaking and then like the second part talking about like the discriminatory rules.
Yeah, you're right. You led off, and then I was like, oh, the question about this.
Yeah. Yeah. So I guess amended.
Does anyone here know why you do that?
Oh, you're on mute.
No, this is no big
What's
deal.
wrong with the agenda?
Does anyone here know why the agenda has 7:30 specified?
Josh, you never find out this is streaming.
It's working. If you know it.
Oh, we're just trying to find
She'll
it.
talk right there.
It should be about 5 p.m. Yeah. It should be 5:40 p.m. is when. It's like 10 minutes into the stream.
Live streaming a previous live stream.
Yeah, I was about to say, I was like, well, this is like.
Like live stream instead of streaming.
I can pull it up on here if we prefer.
So there was confusion. I mean,
I can just email you the link. I don't know why. Yeah, sure, me too.
It's like what, YouTube/SGA or something?
I just messaged you the link on Gmail.
On Gmail?
I emailed you the link. I don't know why I said message. I mean, I could message you before.
It's fine, I got it. You sent it via Basecamp.
Oh. Alright, let me know. Oh, you're typing it.
I don't have my email up on there. Sorry.
Okay.
Just type in organic.
It's like TV.
Yeah.
Just search YouTube in the YouTube through UMBC SGA Times.
Not worth watching that one.
It's not.
Oh my god.
Oh, did I open the wrong one?
It's some like hate watching us.
Josh, you never find out this is streaming.
It's working. If you know that.
It's working.
Is it streaming? I don't know. All the way across the so then,
So,
the last pass. So,
Yeah, I know.
about when, you were told when about the deadline was, we were under the impression.
I know exactly what it's like I wanted.
But that's,
Yeah, it's so weird looking back.
that was after this, they're no longer requesting accepted by the next group. So. Sorry, I've been having it for a while.
yeah, so it's nice but reflective of CSP service reconsideration. So it's reconsidered CS.
So I guess those numbers are not accurate anymore.
When the bottom of the amount of $297.
We're way behind.
Yeah, we were. We started out way.
That's what you did.
Our legal was, 3,967. The total was like $4,000.
Well, so and the line item is, or the unit cost is $170. Did we do general business or $1,000?
Yeah, we did.
Yeah,
it's really good. Budget was towards the end. What happened? Budget was towards the
Yeah, so the most research program platform for figuring out and it's really good about organizations to market those skills to employers. And I'm trying to recall from last year when I went just look around. I went to the problems, but I think those started saying that if there's a big problem on one, then it should kind of do something.
I'm not seeing this whole section in the next.
Provide as an organization for this, just having their own and do something special in that regard.
Which they are, it's $128.21 per tabletop. My assumption, though, I like to look up
whatever you hear up top, search it up. It's gonna be
we
close.
spoke to a few, but I did nothing. Yeah, but we're talking about Team Dev Club, and I think we did that in meeting progress, and that's
I've
not
led meetings that we can check the minutes from that time, but I believe the agreement for funding the markers, either the fall or spring, I don't recall,
was that they would work with the college to fund those markers in the future. And then I think the same. I don't think that makes a difference. I think that your
precedents held by previous.
it's not a precedent.
Well, no, essentially we that it doesn't matter because
to do something for a particular funding for the
We're just looking for the part where Megan was asking about the eligibility of the constitutional changes.
the department is also used for classes, so there's no distinction between organizations and those classes.
We talked about JSC and I don't think that makes a difference in whether we can fund it first.
Practice, so I don't think it matters.
So this is an additional 50 or 50 off campus. No, this is just all the. Does anyone remember about when we got here? That's correct.
And so Hannah made a note about the timeline restriction. Did they come up with requests up to $299,000?
I think we're in general.
That's because I was at $299,000.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Like me when I talk about the budget, I say we're in at $279.
We have 5 subscribers. We're about to make it. I mean,
I would keep going on.
Even though we talked about the Constitution, legislation.
We didn't get to.
I can't even hear this now.
Your transfer.
This is it.
Yeah. Do you want me to jump back a little bit?
Maybe a little bit, yeah.
It's just like a check so that the SGA advisor isn't just like, oh, you're not going bye. And like that's how it shouldn't be like so weird.
Maybe go back a little bit more.
So it's kind of spelled it out a little bit more. So, well, the SGA advisor wants to know if they're eligible. So yeah, most of the changes were like little things like there's the conveyors, neutral pronouns, too much the slide. Adding the SGA advisor as someone who could administer the oath if for some reason the initiation of the new SGA was after the May 15th thing, and there are like no longer any SGA officers who could administer the oath to the incoming officers, and the SGA advisor would be allowed to do that. Just happens. The ineligibility clause was the big thing of contention last night in the Senate. Because this talk about but it was just talking about like being more specific about the process of if someone is found academically ineligible or ineligible in some way, how is that being addressed by the advisor, and like when is that being addressed, and what kind of time and manner. And so because it's the Constitution, this is just more kind of a general like show of like this is how the initial process of being right, like the student, how the students
You're typing away there.
and how the SGA advisor can contact that person and that process is part of the work they're doing. So
There you go.
yeah.
So why would see that was the question. I forget what that was saying. Why would
You go back.
So,
yeah. So why would appeal court? Because the SGA advisor
Appeals court.
appeal court was a student's academic
Probably
standing.
in the people's court.
They have to be judged.
They're
so
very thing.
So, and the idea of like how to work it, it's just like a check, so that the SGA advisor isn't just like, oh, you're not going bye, and
hours to see like sort of
Yeah, it is.
so we can kind of spell it out a little bit more. So well, as you guys want to know that they're eligible, and there will be hours or so of like notifying that they have the student has the chance to appeal it to the appeals board, like notify the appeals board if they're like, no, actually, like when you did better because of the grade, something changed late or something like that. Like there was a case where something was pending or a grade hadn't come and been updated yet. So it gives like the student a chance to kind of not fight it, but like appeal that if there is other information so that they should be back.
It's like the case that well, my professor just has not turned out to find a grade change yet. They're eligible. Right? And then all you have is the university's official record of what happens. If, and we also think that things like, well, the registrar's records, the state has to be something that would actually be addressed between the advisor and the person, the advisor would say, I'm not going to look at that if the advisor did that appeal, but I think this is where, after having examined the issue and considered what the person had to say about why the university's records might be accurate, and perhaps even after saying, okay, even though I've seen your transcript and your fall semester grades for you eligible because we're over the winter and you have no duties at the moment, I'm going to give you a record on your professors that had grade change yet. And then I'm going to check again, this would be my official check. All that happens still. But if you get to the end of that and the person says, well, who believes in transcripts anyway? Or even though I withdrew from this semester and middle of the semester, that means that my GPA didn't fall below the threshold, so they didn't get grades at all. Therefore, I'm eligible, right? That kind of thing, it seems to be, the answer said that they're eligible, but he was working on it, you are.
So I think that was kind of the discussion.
Yeah, that part of the minutes. So yeah, I guess. I mean, could you go back into the drive and make those amendments to the existing minutes from the 17th?
I want to add like the string.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
like, do you mean right now?
I mean, yeah, like, I'm just thinking, why don't we all just, like,
oh, okay.
I think, okay, yeah, and, basically the gist was Megan asked, like, how does the appeals board, like, why do they need to be roped into it, I guess? Or the question was more of, like, why does the appeals board have to come into play if you're already ineligible?
Yeah.
And they didn't answer that question with a better example than mine.
With the example of essentially the appeals board being a challenge to the process itself rather than the facts of the case. At least that's how I felt about it. Like saying, well, the transcript, why are we looking at transcripts at all? That kind of argument is kind of meta to the case rather than, well, my grade was this.
I think to me the bottom line was spelling out the involvement of the appeals board in resolving eligibility determinations makes it possible for an SGA officer who's found ineligible to challenge the advisor's judgment on that point. It puts the,
Yeah.
right, it makes the appeals board and not the advisor the final judge of eligibility.
Is that good?
Oh, you want to write that down? I was just gonna like look at the whole conversation.
Yeah. Edit it. Okay, so we need to be able to vote on the minutes by the end of the meeting. So like it needs to be done.
Yeah, I'll do it for
I
one.
can type in that summary that I just spoke.
Okay.
Yeah.
Actually, yeah, let's do that so that you can just continue taking minutes like right now. Okay.
You also vote on the next week.
Huh?
You also might vote on
No, we can't. According to
the
the
auto
procedure.
approves at the end of the meeting. changed from presented yesterday?
Which one we talk about first? The election board stuff, or the? Let's talk about the election board stuff. This more of a challenge.
This one is on the agenda first.
Yeah.
Okay, there we go. Yeah, let's go to SGA 16 real quick. This is the same order we were just discussing in the Senate. So, all right. So this, I mean, I think everyone is aware. So I can start taking questions, but I'll briefly explain. When we agreed to bring the election board members and the election board chair on, we did so under the assumption that we would increase the stipends available in the budget that is to be paid to both Sophia LaPresti, the election board chair, and then the aggregate stipends for all the election board members. It's been a challenge because this was talked about in the Senate a couple weeks ago. The issue is that we couldn't just talk about it here for a minute, so this is the earliest we can get on the schedule. This is basically, and Daniel was there as well, like this is what we agreed in the nominating committee, and we said during the confirmations, yes, exactly, that we would change these. So after some discussion in the Senate, we have agreed with the election board to have sort of, I think the current number is 1,800 for the election board. In order to get to 2,200 for $275 per member because we have a larger board this year, and then increasing the chair from 878 to 1,000.
Yep.
Great. Are there any questions on that?
So the rationale behind that was that the reason because stipend increases is election board as a whole is a very difficult position to ascertain, like to maintain.
Yeah.
This year I think we've been very lucky. It's I mean kind of unlucky as well. The election is not as competitive, therefore people aren't as aggressive, I guess, in some of their methods. So we have not seen the heavy utilization of the election board to root these type of things out. However, in past elections, everyone who's been here before, we've seen the nasty stuff that goes on. We've seen the underhanded tactics. We've seen the mudslinging.
Yep.
It's a difficult job. The amount of complaints that come in, the amount of things that they need to investigate builds up, and they should be provided a attractive stipend.
And it was also difficult to find if people that knew were close to the or close to the nominating committee. It was also very difficult to find an election board chair. Like we went through the search process halfway through last semester. No one was biting.
No one wants it.
Yeah, we reached out to Sophia, who did it last year, for those that don't know. And she was studying abroad, so it was a lot of different things, and she agreed to come back and bring some of the members of the election board back as well. So changing that for that. Yeah.
Cool. Does anyone else have any questions on the rationale or anything like that? Okay. I'd like to move to approve JL 16, 17, 18.
Okay. All right.
Does this need to be roll calls?
No, it's fine.
Alright. Alright, there's been a motion to approve joint legislation 16, 17, 18. All members for? Right. 6 for, 0 against, 0 abstaining, 1 absent. Alright, so this JL is passed.
Great.
Wonderful.
Let's move on to 17. You pulled the spreadsheet over. Thank you. Okay, so the only changes, I hope everyone got a chance to look at the budget over as we discussed in the past. The only changes that we saw yesterday, actually, can you go to the overall tab, Nova, please? Is to this tab. There were some concerns brought up in SAFRB as was expected. The big change here is to line A16 and A17, right? So A16 before was cut entirely based on our new agreement with Campus Life to provide $154,000 to all the staff support, which previously was our advisor, a portion of David's salary, and then the accounting associate in the business center. What changed, what was not communicated up to the hierarchy, was that that the $154,000 would not include the portion of David's salary from before, right? So even though David is moving to the institute, this is also the division was counting on in its budget this allocation to still go to his salary. I know it's going to be confusing. So, other questions? So that's what we added back yesterday.
So basically, you kind of changed the name of where you're allocating that money towards.
Yes. Going. Yeah. So 817 is new. That wasn't there before.
Okay.
Yeah.
Was it already going to be the 15,000 or so that it was before? Like it was.
So before it was
before
it was 30. You know, it would have been zero before. So this is a complete addition. Yeah. So based on that, and then a little bit of inflation for 13,322, we usually increase it every year by 3%. This will be $14,000 for the next 3 years, and won't be increased per our new agreement. Does that make sense?
Was this a discussion about the 4% thing that Nancy was?
No,
talking about?
I'll talk about that in a second. Yeah.
Sorry, per what agreement? And
the new agreement with Campus Life, which we're probably going to split out into 2 separate agreements. But at first it was, I think I forwarded it to you. 154, yeah. It's 154, but now it's changed to 168.
Oh, it's just, okay.
Yes, it's just gone up to 168,
okay.
yeah. Does that make sense?
Yeah, sorry, I thought you meant there was something else.
Yeah. You want to say something?
A comment. The larger point is the division can't simultaneously add staff and cut the funding sources for that staff. So, which is what Dr. Young discovered would have been the result of this. To me, this is actually a really happy outcome. It doesn't change my compensation at all, but it does establish a formal connection between SGA and the Institute for Democracy and Civic Life. SGA will literally retain a portion of my salary. To me, that is nothing but a good thing.
Yeah, the way Dr. Young worded it was, we're supporting the initiatives that are coming out of the institute, but we also need to be supporting the individuals that are creating these initiatives, which this line item is doing. Okay. That makes sense.
All right, are there any questions on this? Great. I'll highlight 2 more changes and then we're done. You go scroll up to the top, Nova, please. Thank you. So line A4, administrative overhead. I believe we talked about this before. I'm not sure. All the timelines are blending together for me. But administrative overhead, every campus department pays 4% of their total operating budget for administrative overhead by default. Every campus department does it. It is a fee, generally, for most departments, it's a fee to the university for basically using the services of the university. Talking about like using procurement or using payroll services and all those different things. Like all of that is included in a department's administrative overhead. We don't pay our administrative overhead to the university. Instead, we pay it to Campus Life, and through that agreement. But because it has sat, the last time this line was changed, it was back in, if I'm not mistaken, it was back in 2015. Yeah, that fiscal year. So what SAFRB wants to see it changed back to is the actual 4% for based on our income, our projected income.
And can you explain where the 4% came from?
4% is the university standard.
Okay.
Yep. So this is going up $2,046, and we'll go to Campus Life. Are there questions?
So it would be 4% of the projected income
Yes.
for next year of like what we're expected.
It's 4% of the income, so it will fluctuate because the projected number is different than the actual number we will bring in. But this is the closest budget we have.
Okay.
Yeah. I think no one has a question.
I think my
Megan,
Oh, sure.
I think it might be well worth it in the future just to ask for a breakdown of overhead. That's something that, like, just like my personal level, I've always been curious about whenever I'm here. Like, what exactly does it fund?
So David has some stuff, but I can. How long do you want to do? Go ahead.
Like, I recognize it's a regular business practice.
Yes.
Like, I see no issue with it, but I think it'd be good to know. If somebody were to ask me, I'd say, I'm not quite sure. Go to David, go to Josh.
Well, so first of all, every department in the university, including Campus Life, pays the 4%. It's just that for most departments it goes to somewhere central, and for SGA it goes to Campus Life. But if we started to make a list of all the things that Campus Life does that benefit SGA's constituents, the total number will be far in excess of $40,000, right? So the student orders coordinator position, for example, SGA doesn't provide salary support for the 2 student orders coordinator positions for next year, but it's student organizations that get the benefit of those positions. And so you can interpret it that this $42,000 will go to them, or to the programming of the Mosaic, or to any number of other things. Like, I don't know how much value there is in trying to trace those particular dollars through the budget. You just know Campus Life's budget is designed to balance, and it's balancing in part counting on that revenue.
The way it was explained to me was pretty much similar to that. It's for all those unquantifiable things of service that we get from Campus Life. So like when our copier broke down like regularity last year, like when we can come up, they give us license to come up and use the copier up here. Or like we get some support from the director, we don't directly support their salary. So like those things. It's kind of rough.
In some ways, it's like a financial
It's like a catch-all. Yeah.
give to,
Exactly.
to our relationship. That's fine.
Yeah.
I think that just needs to be kind of said.
Yes.
Yeah.
With all these things, and it's true for the future contribution to the Institute too, you know, the trade-off here is either the stuff's going to get paid for through the commons fee or through the student activity fee. The real consequence of that is not how much your students pay. The consequence is how much does SGA get to say, wait a minute, this is the fee that we have responsibility for, so we want to talk about the impact that our dollars are making.
Right, and so when you think of something like administrative overhead and the possibility of going to coordinators, then when decisions are being made about those positions or, you know, moreover, like the programming Campus Life, I think SGA then should start kind of saying, we are equally involved in this.
For what it's worth, that was kind of my thought there as well. So I would concur that since we are not paying to the central authorities that most campus departments pay to, and since we do have a close working relationship with Campus Life, I think it would be only equitable that, given that we are providing them with funds and that we have this working relationship, that we should get some influence over those positions that do benefit students that are being funded through this line. And I agree with Megan that, well, and I understand David's point that it is not that there is not necessarily an audit to be had of this line. I would be interested for the Business Services Center to give it a shot. They don't need to have a perfect accounting of it, but I would be interested in the kinds of things that come out of there. For example, I believe it was an issue this year that we recently found out that the SGA had been funding for years out of the administrative overhead line wristbands at events, and
that's not true. It was not out of the administrative overhead. It was out of the rest of the budget.
Was that where?
It was one of those unclassed things that never had a home.
Run that by me one more time.
It was one of many unclassed things that just did not have a home in the budget. But I get what you're saying. I get what you're saying, though. Yeah.
Yeah, you're speaking to the fact that
Yes.
we have a partnership with Campus Life,
Yeah,
and that we're well aware that we work with them, not just on programming, but we also contribute financially to their programs, which is important and something that SGA recognizes. I just think it would be beneficial for SGA to like start recognizing like the great responsibility that comes with financially funding departments like Campus Life. Like, I don't think it's something we've ever fully realized as an organization.
And to what you were saying just a second ago, Nova, it's just the challenge with auditing this line is that you calling for an audit of this line would effectively say let's audit the entire Campus Life budget, because it just goes into like a general pot. It's not segmented, unfortunately. But I understand that, and I wish there was a place.
And I mean, I guess in the same sense as we report to the SAFRB with an accounting of how we spend our money in our budget.
Yeah.
I would be interested in maybe a small presentation from Campus Life explaining how they're spending, say, $40,000 that they feel that would be how they feel $40,000 of the student activity fee were spent to us.
Okay. Other questions? There's one last change. And I want to make sure I get to it. All right, great. Can you go under the operating tab, Nova, and then short on segments? So there was a concern in the Senate that increasing the, especially knowing that we're dedicating the organization to reviewing stipends entirely over the next year, which is what the Senate passed the budget with that only note last night. There was a concern about simultaneously decreasing the cabinet officer pot would hurt the overall, like it should be an overall increase or an overall everyone stays the same. So as a compromise, instead of decreasing the cabinet officer's pot, we've restored it to $17,500, and we still are increasing the legislative branch stipends, just as a compromise. So it's not an increase to the executive branch at all. It's just leaving the executive branch the same, and then increasing the legislative branch by 6%, which the aggregate numbers for Senate and Finance Board representatives was also corrected last night. Yeah.
I'm not seeing in this budget an actual funds spent column.
Yes.
Can you give us an estimate of how much of that $17,500 was dispersed?
I can probably get a number for you. But the issue with this line is that it's entirely dependent on what the next administration will do. Some administrations are larger, some administrations are smaller.
Sure, and I
so
think
just like,
in the case that the administration decides to be larger, they do have the fallback of the mid-year budgeting process if they so chose to increase it in that way. So
agreed. I can get that number to you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because I'd be interested in seeing if we are hitting that. Because for example,
no, we are not. I can tell you for a fact that we're not hitting that.
Or
yeah.
I mean, a percentage would be interesting because I know, for example, for the retriever, that number for writing staff is always, I think, a comfortable 20% or so above the amount that is dispersed in a year because of exactly that flexibility. But for example, if this number was dispersed at 50% higher, then perhaps that money would be better spent somewhere else in the budget. That's my thought.
I think that's fair. I think I can get you that number. I need to do some hunting for it, but I think we are where we are. Yeah.
I think a lot of stipends were cut.
Yeah, a lot of stipends were cut, and a lot of people did resign for spring semester.
I feel like.
So like the Senate, like even the Senate line will only be 75% used. So it's kind of mine be 75 to be specific. So it's kind of the challenge. I don't have the numbers because this is all of the numbers that I have will only be reflected for first quarter. So it won't, it's kind of difficult to do that, so yeah. All right, any other questions?
What was the new base for the increase for the legislative branch?
All legislative branch stipends got increased by 6%. So you can see the speaker, chair, assistant speaker, vice chair, and both secretary stipends directly on there. And then senators and finance board representatives make $704 now. It's gone up to $746.
Okay.
Yep.
And where did that number come? I'm just curious as to like, it was just like the 6%.
This is 6%, yeah.
Okay.
It's 6%. Like literally, no. If you could hit the thing, no, the like one of the lines above that. Like you can see, it literally just says times 1.06.
Okay.
It's a 6%. All right. Any other questions? That's all the changes since last week. Are there any questions about the budget in general? About any of the lines in the budget? Or do we want
I can't vote on this, but as a student, I would like to register that I'm still uncomfortable with the amount of justification that SEP provided, at least according to the Senate meeting minutes, for their $16,000 increase in the stipends line item. And I feel like the $16,000 increase in stipends compared to the $944 that we're implementing for the legislative branch of the SGA, which serves a fairly important purpose in my mind, is something to keep in mind. And well, I'm sure this budget will be passed today. I would urge any future finance board or Senate to be mindful of the increase that is being allotted to the SEP, and to perhaps implement some better oversight on how those funds are being spent.
Are there any other comments about any of the parts of the budget?
I mean, if people are concerned about the SEB line, we can discuss it. I mean, we can't change it at this point, but if people are interested in talking about that. Again,
the finance board could technically reject the budget, so
yeah.
Don't say it's not fair to say that they couldn't change it.
No, I said we can't change it here. We can't change it right here. But if people don't feel comfortable with SEB's increase, then you have the right to vote it down.
Is everyone like aware of it?
What?
How is it?
Yeah, they're only $16,000. How many? They have 11 coordinators.
It's like
17 coordinators paid at what, $3,000 each?
Yes.
It would equate to $50 per paycheck for each member.
Like an increase.
So the current pot for a stipend is what?
Hold on. Can you? No, it's on the drive. If you want to show everyone.
Give me one
$60,000
moment.
is on what? 11 to 12% increase?
It's what was the file called? It's FY.
It's right there. It's literally that one right there.
Is it that
the second one?
Maybe your answer.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's the current budget.
How much do they allocate currently? Or
Sorry, let me zoom in.
Their budget is a lot simpler than ours, y'all. Personnel is 52,000. So I don't know what number that is. 52,000.
That's by 16,000.
It's a 30.7% increase.
So what was the justification again?
I'll take this one.
Justification for the $60,000 increase to their stipends in particular was essentially because, how do I best explain this? It was more of just like for the work hours that are put in per week, especially coming around like Quad Mania time, like homecoming, the officers or e-board members put in a lot of hours, and while their compensation isn't like base hourly, they do put in a lot of hours each week to host several events each week. So the justification was more of like compensating for all those hours put in and what is produced. And so they felt like a few extra bucks per paycheck would help offset kind of student living costs, as well as for students working multiple jobs on campus and such. So that was kind of quickly just, yeah, I don't know, they covered everything.
So what they're saying is with an extra $16,000 to provide 30% more value to the university, essentially?
So the way it was justified, and Marquia did raise her hand.
Yeah, I saw Marquia.
Yeah. The reasoning behind the $16,000 increase, as they presented it to the Senate, was that they've been working for a number of years without an increase, and that number is still in dispute a little bit. But they've been working a number of years without an increase to their base budget, and the level that they're working at now does not match what their stipend levels are currently. So that's why they're asking for the increase. So it's not saying we're increasing it for a 31. I'll give you 31% more. It's we're already working at 31% more. Can we raise the stipend to that level?
And I guess for the record, they did mention that for people who weren't graduating, they were asked during their presentation whether they would not seek another job because of the stipend increase, and their answer to that was no. So even if this was not to go into place, the board would continue doing their jobs. And I would also like to mention that stipend is specifically supposed to not be a hourly wage, and that we also put in a large number of hours compared to if our stipends were converted to hourly compensation.
I would also like to point out that the senator that asked that question realized how inappropriate the question was after they asked it.
I'm sorry, what makes it inappropriate? If you want to clarify that?
Yeah.
Because I think that it's a fair question if there's justifying it based on the fact that people would seek another job if this was not true. I don't see how that's not appropriate.
An appropriate question. It's not an appropriate question.
People feel like sharing whether they or not they would have multiple campus jobs.
Exactly.
They're looking for more monetary income.
It sounds like being open about the reasons for the increase, doesn't it?
Sounds like we should move on with this discussion.
Yeah, sounds like fine is what we're about interest.
All right.
Are there any other questions about the SEP increase?
Oh no, I'm just resting on your position.
Let's see.
Thank you. Great. This one is JL 17.
Move to approve JL 17. Second.
All right, we can motion to approve joint legislation 1718. All members for? 2 against? Oh, sorry. 4 members for. Any against? 2. 0 abstaining, 1 absent. You guys wanted to voice your, I guess, decision to vote against. You could have done that before the vote, but I'm just curious to know why.
For me, my concern has been just the SCB raising stipends. I don't have any issue with any other part of the budget, but I don't see necessarily at this time an appropriate reason why we would increase the stipend of the student debt board by 31%. It just seems, even if we were to increase the stipend, it seems a little elaborate for the budget at this time.
Estimated $16,000. If the idea is that, so we, for the legislature and executive branches, we said, okay, if everyone's going to go through austerity essentially, it's we're choosing not to increase spending, and we're throwing $16,000 to another area. despite the fact that we, as a legislative branch within SGA, agreed upon Stipend, essentially. So I don't see like, oh yeah, sure, I definitely admit SU provides a lot to this campus, but if everyone else is still suffering underneath the same circumstances, why are we throwing $16,000 to them at the current moment? It just doesn't seem, because technically, I don't know, like, what's the official thing? SEP is a chart organization underneath SGA, is it not?
Yeah.
So, as an organizational as a whole, I think it's fair to say that currently SGA stipends are extraordinarily low. And we had agreed, okay, we need to address this problem, but we won't address it in this budget. Yet, simultaneously, where SEB is now, I think it's fair to say that their budget situation is not, or their stipend situation is not as severe as ours, yet we're throwing them $16,000. And we have no oversight of whatever happens to that afterwards. And then like this, I imagine will continue year after year, but we'll sit here and then be like, all right, hopefully we get something done.
It's just like, I see how it seems like that on the surface level, but it's not as simple as that. So when they proposed their budget increase to the SAFRB, which is like something that came out of SGA, like those are our advisors that were asking to give us advice on these budgets. They approved the stipend increase for SEP. And then the next part to that is that the 2-year plan to increase the student activity fee is not happening because not enough undergraduate students took the survey to tell us that they wanted an increase. So we're not getting that increase. So now we're facing SEB wanting an increase, and we're not able to offset that budget by giving SGA members an increase in their stipend.
Yeah. It is kind of up to you. Like, even though SAFRB looked upon favorably at SEB's increase, like it is still up to us to say that is it worth the student? Do the reasons they present outweigh like the impact of student dollars? So we can still, like, even though SAFRB looks upon that favorably, we could still say that it's inappropriate. One of the things that I always take issue with is that like SEB is actually paying its members like a fair wage, like, and we are not, obviously, as which was just described. Like, we will, like, the Senate did pass it with a note and everything, and it said that we will definitely be re-looking at stipends again next year. But it's kind of difficult to hold other organizations to our low standard, and like why would we scrutinize another organization for having higher standards than we do? But I mean, like, and it's up to every individual person to decide for themselves. But like, it's kind of difficult for me personally, to hold another organization who holds its officers to that holds their stipends to a higher standard for other people, and when we are taking the humble route, when we can do the same thing that they can do. So I take issue with the idea that because our stipends are low, SEB should not get an increase.
For me, it's more like this. It's just like, we have a problem already.
Yeah.
This is developing. Why don't we address our issues first? Because we have what? We have 6 people running for finance board, 12 people running for Senate, no competition across virtually all 3 executive boards. Clearly there's an issue within recruitment. We just put it off a year again. Like,
I think that's fair.
We're just pushing our problems further and further back. SEB in a couple of years, they're gonna, like, inflation always occurs. Like, roles always expand, responsibility always expands. We can't keep on pushing off our own issues, though. Because I think it's fair to say right now, SGA at its core, we're losing members left and right. And we can't keep people, but we push it off again. And like, sure, there's a promise that like, okay, we'll get something else done later, but next year Senate can simply choose, oh, we're not going to do that, and we're back to square one again.
Well, can't you do that? Can't the finance board do that next year?
The Senate has, like, in the note that says it says the SGA. It says the SGA. So cue Sophia with election day. The note that the Senate passed with the budget says that like we have to review in the fall, beginning in the fall, it has to be reviewed that stipends are reevaluated, and that was communicated to SAFRB, and they are also, because again, SAFRB has been saying for years that, and upper administration has been saying for years that SGA stipends are awful. So, like, it's taken until this year to say that, okay, we actually want to review them in order to make them more equitable. But then the challenge is, yeah.
In my mind, I don't know why we put SCB ahead of our own issues. That's my issue with it. Because we could have pushed this, like you said, that, yeah, we didn't vote to increase the funding. That's perfectly fine. Next year's budget, there's always next year's budget. We could have, SCB's increase could have happened next year. And then we could have addressed our critical issues within our own organizations. And then at the end of the 2 years, we end up at the same spot. But at least SGA has a bit more breathing room. But instead today, we simply, with this budget, we just said, okay, we'll push it off and we'll hopefully deal with it 2 years from now when we're already seeing the effects of it. It just seems like we're putting money into a place where it just, to me, it doesn't make any sense. We know we have problems, yet we're choosing not to address them instead. And I know we're choosing to address them in the future when they're affecting us now. But yeah, no, that's it.
Okay, Michael, you hand up, then. Are you sure? No, but then Ikea.
So just for context, that $16,000 increase is comparable to the entirety of the cabinet officer's pot at about $17,000. So I think just the magnitude is a little bit off to me in my mind in terms of how much that pot should increase. I'm not arguing that stipends are or aren't at the correct amounts. I mean, we were saying that we're going to do this process next year of reviewing them. I don't see why we couldn't wait to comprehensively review also charter organization stipends at the same time. But I'll leave that to the legislators. I have a procedural question, which is in the budgetary statutes, the joint legislation for the budget requires a 2/3 majority in the Senate and the Finance Board. I don't believe that we've received a 2/3 majority here today.
In the statutes?
I think there was 4 to.
No, the budget is by majority as well.
Is it?
Yes.
Maybe I'm.
According to the budgetary policy, but I can look.
And we had 4 to 6 anyways, right?
Yeah,
well, it's 4 out of 7.
But
in the case, this is pretty clearly spelled out in Robert's rules.
Let me see.
That in the cases of 2/3 votes, that it is of all members of the body, and in those cases, an abstention counts as or abstention or absence counts as a no vote. But I will check. I thought it was joint legislation.
Majority vote.
Is a majority? I thought it was the budgetary policy for the FY budget says majority vote. I thought.
Section 5.4.
Majority vote of members present or
It should be a majority vote is of members present. So
I think we're good to move ahead though.
you said it's in the statutes, Noah?
I guess I'm looking at the reserve account here. So that's a different thing.
Alright. Yes.
I think sometimes in SGA, things start to slip, and then they slip over and over again as people get used to the expectation that they will slip. So this happened with our election process, where the expectation that an election board chair would be appointed early in the fall semester slipped over time to appointing an election board chair with barely enough time to plan an election. That needs to change, and the idea that the budget is something that we really start talking seriously about only in the middle of the spring semester when it's time to start making submissions also needs to change. This stipends issue is a really good thing for the SGA to take up next fall and do the research and figure out what it's going to take to satisfy SAFRB and figure out what is a fair and reasonable level of stipends and what impact that's going to have on attracting membership, and get all of that done well ahead of the actual putting together of a budget.
Keita, you had your hand up earlier.
Yeah, I was gonna just say that even though I understand the sentiment, I also don't understand why you necessarily have to come first before another organization, so long as we're all getting raises. But I'm not sure why it matters so much if they come this semester and we come next semester. But also, I hear a lot of talk about compensation being the reason why people are leaving SGA, or why people are not running for SGA, which I think is an assumption, even though I can understand why that assumption is being made. We have been underpaid forever, and it's only become a problem this year, and it's something that's across the board and not just in SGA. Campus life in general, not even just campus life, but the Division of Student Affairs has had much less participation from undergraduate students than in past years, all over the board. And I'm not really sure what, the contributor to that is. But I just want to say that perhaps there are other reasons past just lack of compensation to attribute to why students are not as involved as they have been in years past.
As I've mentioned in the past, we have not always had a stipend problem necessarily. In the SGA, the stipends were in the past tied, at various times tied to tuition, up to and including the president being assigned the full in-state tuition as their stipend, as well as the Speaker of the Senate being assigned 75% of that. I might be misquoting that number, but these numbers were tied to value that they were providing to campus and to this idea that a senator should be spending, essentially thinking of their job as a full-time job, the finance board member thinking of their job as a full-time job and not just something to be done at a meeting. So I would take issue with the concept that this has been a problem forever. We didn't start out this way. In recent years, but I think it is important to think about this over the course of history. And I think the other thing is, in terms of timing, the $16,000 this year came from somewhere. Where did we cut for that, Josh?
Okay, I'll tell you all, because I told the same thing to the Senate, just to make sure it's fair. There are a couple challenges with the 16,000. We mainly, it's going to sound awful, like no pressure set, but we had to make sure that the budget balanced as much as possible. So we sacrificed a change to the merchandise and the marketing fund, which were both going to be increased for organizations. It was not as increased, and then that was only because before it had to be changed to the $8,000 surplus. So it was just $8,000 just sitting there with no home. So those were the two places that we're going to see the most change. I think you can probably look at the changes way back when. It was a lot of changes ago, but I think we increased the merchandise fund by $5,000 after consulting with Young, and we increased the marketing fund by a bit as well. So those were the main two, really. So.
And so for that being said, I do think that it will be useful to do things like tie your stipend increase to a fee increase, or tie your stipend increase to money becoming available in the budget rather than sacrificing other lines for that. And I'll shut up now about it because the budget has passed. It's too late to make a change.
I mean, if the finance board would like to reconsider, it's up to the finance board. I haven't signed it, so obviously it can still be reconsidered in this body. But
Tanya, did you have your hand raised earlier? Did you have a question about the thing?
I mean, what can I say? This year it's like written down that we will do this in the fall. I mean, I won't be here to see it through, but it is written down, set in stone. Great. Unless someone wanted to, we can say. Great, awesome.
So we passed both JLs in the budget. So as stated.
think there may be an opportunity on Friday to communicate to SAFRB some of this discussion as a way of further cementing the expectation that SGA is going to take a look at some stipends in the fall.
Because then SGA is for SAFRB is aware of that next year. If you want to present the budget, and we said we were going to increase favor public question.
And so that they're conscious of the fact that what's happening this year is that SGA is choosing to fund the SEP stipend increase at the expense of other things it might have funded with the activity fee, and also to hold the line on its own stipends despite some concern that people may not be joining the organization because of the level of the stipend.
Okay, what do you make sure that's said on Friday? Great, thank you.
Oh wait, not this Friday.
Okay, well, Hannah, thank you.
Okay. All right. So now I kind of wanted to take some time to reflect on this year, and something I brought actually was at our special meeting in December. We had like a bunch of papers out talking about like our different goals and stuff from them. So I'll just put them around there at the front, I guess. But basically, I just kind of wanted us to start thinking about, talking about like things that we just from this year, how we improved, what we have improved upon, what we haven't. Things, I guess. And then talking about like reflecting on this year and how we transition. So.
Are we ready for the minutes, by the way, at this point? Huh? Are we ready to approve the minutes, by the way, at this point? Because it's just one of those things where the sooner we do it, the better in my mind.
I don't know if Jacob has been through it. You did?
I typed in changes.
Okay.
There.
Yep.
Can we just approve them at the end? I'm sorry, I'm just like, my head is like jumping around. We're just like all over the place.
Good right now. I'd kind of rather have the like reflection discussion now.
Yes.
I got those set up. Might as well do it now, and we can just do that at the end as like a quick double check. But yeah, I guess some questions I just wanted to start asking. So what are some things that have like changed throughout the course of the year that are different from either first semester to this semester, or like things we've improved upon or not? Like I've noticed that throughout the year we've been a lot better at okay, yeah, we just sorry. I've noticed we've been a lot better about like how we address organizations when they come in the room. I feel like this year's finance court has just grown to be a little more friendly and welcoming. But that's also been not as consistent at times, it seems. And I think like it's been kind of like a positive change in that sense. So what are some other things I guess people have noticed kind of different ones?
Some other things that what?
Like reflecting on this year, what are some things that we've like improved upon, or what's changed over the course of the year?
So you mentioned like how we address our approach orgs, but also during discussion pausing to explain like why certain questions were being asked or why the conversations are going in certain directions is an improvement at the beginning of the year.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Oh. You need a marker?
Would this be better on the Word doc for them? Oh, no, I don't know.
I mean, I would think so because then it would.
It's just like more permanent.
Well, because then we can pass it on to the next board without having to have a big debate.
Yeah, I like the idea of it being nice.
And then everyone can see it. Wait, a Google Doc or a Google Doc? Yeah, make it a doc because then we can add stuff after.
I mean, I was just going to upload it, but I can do that. Yeah.
Like in the finance board folder.
Yeah.
What's that?
They don't have access to it.
Okay. Well, they will after finance.
What?
I don't know. Can we just go on with this discussion?
Where do you want it? Ideas and resources?
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
So I feel like when I've gone on and off was including the organizations and discussions. I'm kind of happy for that. I kind of understand. Like they should be able to explain themselves, and we should draw in some.
No.
That's a pro.
I hate a trope.
Wait, sorry, what was a pro?
That having allowing
I feel like there should be a line.
Yeah,
Like there should be like with us while we discuss, like having like clarification and stuff like that. I feel like including them in the discussion every now and then. I'm not saying having them the whole time, otherwise we would have like forever conversations about this because organizations want to be fully funded no matter what. So I
So
feel
how
like
would you control the amount that they contribute to discussion?
I feel like it could be controlled. I also like the idea of like having the organizations allowed to speak during discussion and not having it such a hard cutoff because oftentimes we'll be in the middle of discussion and as we're discussing more questions will come up. So perhaps a way to address that would be having it as more of like, instead of calling it like, I don't know, instead of calling it questions, have it more like inquiry period where it's like questions and like the first part of discussion that organizations are allowed, like it's mostly, not mostly, but it's part finance board discussion and any questions that the finance board comes up during that part of the discussion needs to be asked, they can be asked. And then whenever all of those kind of inquiries are settled, then it's kind of more of like not strictly as formal, but more of just like, okay, now we just want to hear from finance board members discussing like blah, 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 blah about the request. Instead of using it as a Yes,
I have a proposal.
Yeah.
So after having, description, question, and then discussion, and then opening to a small period of like re-question, not for new information, but for clarification, and then going into discussion again, like small, briefly, before final vote. It would be changing the format. It's just an idea.
So like questioning, clarification.
Yeah, so like clarification and then like final discussion vote.
I feel like a lot of that is situational.
Yeah.
Because like there have been instances where we've been in discussion and like one or two of us will misrepresent what the organization said, and we can see the organization squirming, and they're like, "Oh, can we talk? Like this is wrong." And I think in those moments, it's like certainly most appropriate to bring them in, and we've done that. And I think we've done a good job. But I think it's just like feeling the room. Yeah, is so important.
Yeah, that's the other thing too that I like wonder is it more a problem with like how strict we are with it, or is it like you said more kind of like do we need to be more aware of like the student and more adaptable, I guess, and like not as like this is the questioning period, this is the discussion period, and that's what I would think.
Yeah, I think this body wouldn't function efficiently if it didn't have structure. And you can solve the issue by moving back into it, which is something that should just be practiced. So if there's a clarification question that a finance board member has, they should ask the chair to move back into the questions. Move back. That was so gross. Move back into questioning. And that solves that problem. Because if the representatives are actively involved in discussion or involved in clarification, it just drags the discussion on and unnecessary.
Right. It could be.
And like, even in some instances when clarification isn't needed, a representative is still trying to make their case, which just again drags it on when the finance board members' decisions have been made.
Right. And
To
that's
have the representative talk for another 15 minutes about why we need funding isn't beneficial to, or conducive to anyone's time.
great. And that could be more of just like at the discretion of the chair at that point. And I understand like it does drag on whenever you keep it so open like that. But also with like the asking the chair to move back into discussion. I know that's like important to the structure, but that also could create like an awkward kind of like interaction or like be portrayed like awkwardly by the organization. So like I understand your point. I'm just saying like maybe it could be improved for more like free flow with with some kind of structure, not necessarily free flow, but like having it more natural and like organic conversation that's still like controlled by the chair.
This just goes to my like philosophy about the finance board in general. I don't think it really. Well, we should make organization or representatives feel comfortable enough to sit in the room, but my coming into this year, like my mission was to create like a peer environment, but I don't think that this body like works without some level of hierarchy. Like the organization representatives need to understand that our position is, in a sense, like higher than their position, and there has to be like a level of formality, or you fall into situations where representatives are throwing new information onto their budget and like adding line items here and there and just being completely informal about the process, which again is not conducive to everyone's time here and just isn't like a good use of the student dollar to just be like wasting away at like sudden things that they want to add to their budget like the day before their finance board meeting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So in that like sense, I don't think it's wrong to make them feel like yes, there is structure to this and we have to move back into questioning and be proper about what we're doing, because there is a level of formality to this process. While it can still be like your peers sitting around discussing things, there has to be some level of like, we are here and you are under, because we're the student government and they're like extensions of the student government.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's a really good point. And I also, I think that brings up another kind of concern about like how, I won't say how like seriously we're taken, but like you said, with organizations wanting to change things last minute, I think that's a very valid concern that also needs to be considered in like how we are to really assert that like this is the information that you need to know ahead of time, and like these are the rules that you need to follow, and we won't tolerate anything of that. And I think that's something we haven't done this year, has been like we've been more lax about changes to last minute changes to budgets proposed and stuff like that, which could be perceived as like a good or a bad thing. Like you said, like that structure needs to be maintained and that power dynamic needs to be addressed, I guess.
I mean, that said a lot of what I was going to say. I was just going to say, I think the structure is kind of necessary, which is talking about kind of going back into question is necessary, just also because a lot of times when we have discussions, we make points about why we may or may not see the request as maybe the best use of the student dollar. And I think by allowing the organization to cut in, it kind of gives them the opportunity to kind of, I guess, adjust the requests as necessary to try to kind of meet our guidelines or our views to kind of make it more favorable for us to vote in favor of my opinion. But that's
that's really good.
Yeah, I agree with that, but that's work that they should be doing outside the meeting. It's not Tuesday night at 6 p.m. is their time to adjust their budget to what they think is going on. They have the resources, the precedents, documents online. If they want to reach out and ask a support team, hey, can you look over my request and let me know before I submit if I should change anything?
No, I agree with that. That's what I'm saying. I'm saying like when we say certain things during discussion, no examples or
questions.
Yeah, like questions or statements we make, a club may get the idea that maybe we're not favoring this request because of X, Y, Z. So then they'll go back and try to adjust those requests to meet the requirements, I guess they feel like we are holding the request to. And I think that's kind of counterproductive because it makes it hard for the finance board then to judge whether or not the merits of the request, essentially.
Wait, I'm sorry, I don't get that.
I mean, I can come from another perspective. What I think it is.
I'm going to try for it, but maybe not.
I think what Michael's trying to say is that when an organization comes into the room with a particular idea behind their request, and then they hear our questions, and then kind of on the fly adjust the intent of their request to fit what they think will get them the most funding while they're in the room with the finance board, means that the request that we're seeing is a protean thing that we have no way of getting a grasp on. And
they come in requesting cyber cups, and then we hear after discussion and say, can we switch to compostable cups?
And that's the sort of thing that should have been done before before they enter the room, and so that way we can request a static thing, or we can evaluate something. Currently, we're not evaluating a thing; we're evaluating a thought form, kind of.
Yeah. So there's a huge unfamiliarity with policies before coming in, and then changing it here.
Yeah.
That's.
Split it, Russia.
Probably on both ends. Yeah.
I was just going to say, like, the finance board goal for like the next years following, I think, should be to improve that like face-to-face contact with whether it's a support team member or a finance board representative, say during the office hours that we have to meet with organizations to move through and like this is something that is generally applicable or like violates this policy, just to have that familiarity so it's not brought up like you said, it's just what you're saying.
Right, and that's like been difficult for organizations that are requesting at the beginning of the semester, but because like precedents haven't been set, which is like what we tell them during treasure training, but there's still the policies of
there's still the guidelines, right? I mean, there is a guideline that, while it's not the precedents for the year, it is the criteria by which the precedents are set.
Right.
So, in the end, that is the true transparent practice of the finance board that the organization is able to access.
And I think like the guidelines are so important, and like they are available online to everyone, but maybe we need to be evaluating like how, like I guess like where is the knowledge gap occurring? Like why aren't student organizations like accessing the information online? Like why aren't like where is the gap, and like how do we better try to fill that up? Like with the in-person treasure trainings, that's like improved a lot, but like where else do we need to be taking steps? Where does it become like we're holding their hand if we're giving them all the other steps? Like where's the line drawn? Because I know that was like an issue kind of we had, or like something we discussed like at the beginning of the year in terms of like how helpful or like how far do we need to go to ensure that they're successful without like bending over backwards to make sure they're being successful and not holding them accountable. And I think that balance needs to be that needs to be considered too, of how do we do that? Yes, David?
The finance board is so funny and so amazing. I feel like what you've been doing is adulting, right? The finance board, you are in a position where you have to take responsibility for your choices because you live with the consequences, right? In so many different ways. You see the connection between the decisions you make and the consequences. And I think that mindset is pretty unusual. Like you cultivate it when you're in this room and you have to grapple with it. But obviously, if you're not in this room, then there may not be a lot of places that you've been oriented to that mindset. If you're an organization submitting requests, you think you're responsible for getting the best event with the most money you can, and you're not necessarily thinking through, well, but if I do that, and if the implications, and if I don't meet the deadline. So I think the finance board has done a couple of things this year that are really helpful in proactively trying to change people's mindsets. There are baby steps, but I think they've been working well. The giving people a handout when they're at the meeting, explaining some of the things that are going to happen after the meeting. The follow.
And we get it with Kelly too, in their event planning meeting.
Fantastic. And then stalking people as they leave the meeting in order to gauge their reactions and give them helpful information and smooth over any hurt feelings. I think that's really good. I think it's worth the finance board, especially now that you've had this experience, thinking through what are 6 other proactive things we can do to reckon with the fact that people don't already have the adulting mindset outside of this room, right? We know that however much we wish that they would remember treasurer training, they don't. And so if we're going to make progress with them, then something has to change, either about the training or about the way that we're expecting them to take in information. Right? Maybe there's a whole other kind of proactive communication the finance board can engage in with the student body that isn't happening yet, because you're still evolving from the mindset of we set the rules and then wait for people to come to us.
David, how do you want me to sum that up?
The finance board took 2 great proactive steps that I mentioned to change the relationship with organizations in the student body. There are many others, but those are 2 I named. Huh?
Can we not phrase it as stalking?
Well, but no, but I don't necessarily think that it's the budgetary statutes we need to be accessing, though those are important and like guiding documents for us. These are like basic rules that student organizations need to abide by. So the submit by this date, 15 days.
That is in the budgetary statutes. That is what I'm trying to say. Like, it is compiled.
Go to a huge document like that.
It's 5
in
pages.
the allocation request.
Yeah. It is everywhere. I mean, the reason I put budgetary statutes down is because that is where it is all compiled into one place. Like, I appreciate your efforts for the Treasury Manual, and I look forward to seeing that. But the budgetary statutes do compile all of that information because it is a policy that is intended to be comprehensive of the process.
But cleaning up the process and the policies from your point of view does nothing to address the problem that people don't use them, right? And we can all agree that they should, but I don't have any reason to assume that next year they're going to be in a different frame of mind than they are now. And so the only question that you can answer is, what could we do that would help the situation some, given that people's mindsets are what they are?
I hear what you're saying in terms of that there is only so much that we are able to change on our own. I do, in terms of we are not able to control student organizations to have them be the way that we wish that they were.
Right.
I do think that it is a cultural change that cannot only come in the workings of the finance board, that it also needs to be a corresponding cultural change in student organization treasurers to be more fiscally responsible and to do more, if we're going to call it adulting, I would say higher level thinking and civic mindedness, considering yourself part of a community rather than the breadwinner or something for your organization. I think that is something that doesn't require a policy change. It doesn't require necessarily even a practice change in the way that the finance board itself works, but it does require a change in the way that representatives and the body as a whole interact with student organizations. If that makes sense. Last year when I was talking about plans for student organizations around, I think this time, I was talking about the student organization support team meeting with organizations which I believe Megan actually implemented to a degree. I think that that's the sort of thing where we go to those where we talk directly with other students as peers and saying, hey, this is, you're making the job harder in this way, or you can make the job easier in this way, so that way you can see better outcomes for everybody and changing this win-lose situation into a win-win. But this is a reflection on your end. So.
I don't know who the hand up first, but I'm just say hand.
Okay. There's so much information that it's just not conducive for one member to sit down and read through it all by themselves.
And that's something that I heard from Heather, like our president came to training and she was like, this is helpful, like where's the president training? And at the time I was like, are you fucking kidding me? Like you should have done that with your previous president. Like they should have, like that is an intra-organization. Yeah, intra, right? Intra-organizational thing. That should be something that the officers are passing down. But the issue with that is that like misinformation gets passed down that way. Misconceptions and whatnot. But like yeah, where is the line drawn? Like where is the organization's responsibility and where is SGA's responsibility? And I don't think treasurer training is enough because in a lot of circumstances, organizations like don't have the intra-relations, and they have treasurers just like filling a spot. Like we believe you. That girl was just taught. Megan, that girl. Maria. Yeah, she was. Yeah, she has no connection to the organization. She was just filling in as a treasurer. And I know for a few cultural organizations, they have like event planning positions, which is someone that would benefit like greatly from like a treasurer training session because the information they need in terms of like planning their events is information given to the treasurer, and for some reason they can't get together and talk about that information. So it's just like a whole mess of having to inform a bunch of different people about a lot of information.
So, side note, I'm going to be a treasurer for Student Org this year, so I will happily relay any thoughts and information. On that note, this may be an unpopular opinion, but as far as that line, I think that there's still ways to balance that line. I think we've done a better job.
What line?
Sorry, the line of like where the responsibility is, whether it's a student organization or it's SGA and finance boards. So I feel that we've done improvements where we have gotten feedback recently saying like, oh, this aspect of your job is like really difficult, I understand, and some organizations are being more empathetic towards that. My potentially unpopular opinion is that there are certain aspects that we can still do more on, but because it does require a culture change for organizations, that's not something that we're going to see within our semester. It's not something that's even probably going to be seen by the time I graduate, which is in another 2 years. So I think that requires being a little more intentional in some ways, and I think that everything that's done up until this point has been improvements, but I think it also requires feedback from them, but getting them also to see, yes, this job is difficult, and yes, like there is a lot of things, because what I've noticed is that from a lot of treasurers, they're getting information from like their previous treasurer or the previous president, and it's like, oh, well, SGA does or does not do this, which it's not true because it's things that change yearly. So I think there's just like an understanding and perspective on who finance board is and what finance board does that needs to be clarified for organizations in the year.
So how would you classify that?
Increased clarification on who and what finance board is as like a goal moving forward. And as you said, like making sure that students aren't solely focused on being the president of their organization, but more intentionality and effort leading up to the finance board meeting, which I'm not entirely sure what that looks like yet, to be honest. There's a lot room for discussion.
Yeah, I think one thing that we're going to try this year is transitioning boards, which is like a very loose, like sending an email about information that should be passed down from executive board to executive board. That is all contingent on student organization leaders reading their emails, which is the only platform that we really have to communicate with them. Is that what it is? Getting a platform. Getting a platform to communicate with student organizations is one of the main issues we have. There are solutions, right, to how you communicate with student organizations. We'll get there eventually, I think, and we're just having growing pains getting there. But ultimately, I think we'll arrive somewhere. I wanted to go quickly
to, yes, public relations. This is something I've talked with Josh, I've talked to Carly, doing a video, really, really simple stuff at the beginning of the year. You know, this is stuff that relies on finance board. It relies on the 5 people who are on finance board to do. That's your position, in my humble opinion. Get together and say, like, what is it exactly that we're doing? Now, hopefully there's going to be people on the board who are familiar with what finance board is, so that they can have some base knowledge.
Chances of really being useful.
Right. And, you know, say, like, this is, you know, who's who on finance board, this is what they do, this is what it means to be on finance board, so finance board. That is really not hard to do. It would only take a few hours to do, but that requires, like, finance board to do it as a whole. Having a communications person for finance board would be fabulous. Like really, really amazing. Like having somebody in finance board say, listen, this is what I want to do. I want to step up and work on communications. And they can work in conjunction with the support team. Because when all the finance board members are reaching out individually to student organizations, I think you're going to get a more confused message. And I worry that from what I've heard this year from student org leaders, one finance board member has said this to them and another finance board member has said that to them. The information has varied on what finance board has been presented, which is concerning to me because I hear it. And then I ultimately have to say to Hannah, like, why would that have been said? Or, you know, Hannah and I discuss it and figure out, like, where the miscommunication was in finance board's end. That's a huge problem. So having one person in finance board, I think liaison with the future VPSO, with the future support team, would be really pivotal, I think.
Right, sorry, Hannah and then Nova. I think something that plays into that, but one person told me that is 80% of the time when I'm just walking into the SGA office and assuming that anyone in the office is a finance board member, which leads me to my second point about public relations of finance board, as in the difference between, or the fact that finance board isn't all of SGA, which is something we talked about at that meeting. And that, like, the public relations for SGA is 80% finance board because most students interact with SGA in that aspect. And I think it's, like, fair to say that the majority of students just assume that finance board is to SGA. So the difference between those two things. And then, yeah, what Megan said about a platform, I think one of the main reasons why student organizations struggle so much is that there is no central platform. And if you were to argue that my UMBC is that platform, I think a lot of people would laugh in your face because as a previous president of a student organization that just got access to their My UMBC page when I was the president, and the organization is like 15 years old. That's so sad. I know that they just transitioned, or not just, but like the transition to My UMBC was in like 2012 or like 2011, something like that. But I was the president last year, and they didn't have access to their My UMBC page until last year, and it was a struggle to get access to the My UMBC page. I was emailing Chris in the summer, and like I emailed him on June 1st, and I didn't get access to my UMBC page.
Isn't Chris Moss?
Yeah.
Okay, just making sure.
Yeah, sorry.
Chris Moss is the person that works for the Commons IT.
And
like, he's in the Division of Student Affairs.
I came to campus and I tried to like stalk him down. I tried to find his office. It was like in the base of the Commons, and it wasn't really an office. And he just wasn't answering my emails, and I didn't get access to my UMBC page until the month after October. And that was a year ago, so I guess things could have potentially changed. But like my organization was still using a website. Like I guess student organizations used to have their own website, and they were still like giving out that information, which just goes to show like how much disorganization there are in organizations, like even established larger organizations. Like I said, like the org has been here for 15 years, so we don't have like an issue with membership retention, but it just shows like a slight, the level of apathy that student orgs, even successful student orgs can have with just following what previous e-boards have done, because it's the easy thing to do, because there is no platform for them to be updated. Like I think something successful that student orgs somewhat benefited from last year was the fact that the information they needed was on Blackboard, which I realized wasn't sustainable for Romy and just in general, but at least it was like the central platform where even if not the majority of org leaders had access to the Blackboard page, at least it was there in one place. And I know we like spew the SGA website, sga.ubc/request funds, like link to people. It's still not something that they like have an account on, which I think is like that personal association is what they need to really identify with the fact that, oh, this is the site that I have to go to for my information, which maybe might in the future be able to become my UBC, but it definitely isn't right now.
No other than Josh.
So first of all, I wanted to express my concern with the idea that there would be a canonical person potentially for finance board communications. I think as it stands today, there already are people that I would consider the communications people for finance board. That would be the chair of the finance board and to a degree the treasurer, and they already do get requests for that information. I think that if we're looking for those centralized people, I don't think we need to appoint somebody specific. I think we just need to hold those responsibilities there. And not only that, I think, yes, there's confusion from multiple voices reaching out, but I think it's better for there to be some confusion in the message to a degree than for there to be nothing. And I think oftentimes, I think I can remember in my time here times when finance board members would not be in the office at all. That your job was just to come here on a Tuesday night and then leave and never be available for anything outside of meetings. I think some of us remember that. So I think it is better for those finance board representatives to have that message. Now, that being said, we have things like the precedent doc now. We have answers that can be amplified by multiple voices. So I think to that concern, I would love to see when a question is asked of one member of the finance board, that is something that is then essentially spread around. So that way when one question is asked, it goes to the finance board listserv or GroupMe or however it is, or Slack or however it is that you choose to hold that knowledge. But I would love for when somebody gets an inquiry that everyone knows about what that answer was. And dare I even ask that you would ask everyone else and run your message by everyone else before you respond to the individual, so that way there's a second sign-off. Or use the shared mailboxes that we have for that purpose, because I think that the centralization is something that there's the desire for by some individuals, and I understand it, and I have been one of them at one time or another, and I continue to do. I mean, I check the shared mailboxes hourly to make sure that messages don't get left behind. But there needs to be effort from everyone involved. There are too many officers of too many organizations for us to have one person responsible for all of them. We see that in the VPSO's job, and that's, maybe I'm putting words into your mouth, Megan, but I would say that that's probably a fairly big ask of one individual. And there's a reason that the student organization support team exists. Because to represent the interests of 1,000 students is not trivial.
I want to say how much I appreciate this session right now, even though I'm like not actively participating. It is a very big issue, and I think you got into an issue that affects like more than just the finance board. It affects like a lot of different areas of campus. Like we talked about, like how do we get information out to students in an easily accessible format that people actually want to read or interact with. Like that is an issue. Like not just at the university even. This is an issue of society if you really want to go that far. But like I think this is I really enjoyed the discussion. I want to point out a couple different things that people in the room may not be aware of. So Shraddha and I are working on like while the treasure manual is also being worked on, we're also trying to figure out like how we can. She and I are trying to figure out how we can use technology that is actually like good and not bulky like Blackboard or not challenging like my UMBC. We're trying to figure out how we can do treasure training online, but not like it was before. And like looking at different training modules, like who's taking like Psych 100 and like where you have to do like the video and then you have to answer questions, something like that. That's what we're working on right now. So, and I think that we need to be like thinking about how we can use different technologies to our advantage. That would like that's something that my UMBC will never support, right? So like that, and that's something we can outsource really easily. So like, how do we create different innovative things? Like it's not really innovative because it's already done, but like how can we use technology that's already in the world to our advantage to get people out, get knowledge out now? I'm not going to say this will solve all our issues. Like honestly, we can have a discussion at a later date about like a technological solution that will solve all of our issues. That's not coming to UMBC within the foreseeable future. So,
and it's also something that's a technologist's solution to a cultural problem.
But
that it's not sufficient to really implement a technology without buy-in from your community.
As
an IS major, that's something I hear far too often.
I agree to a degree, but yeah, I'm gonna just let the conversation proceed.
Megan, you wanted to say something.
Oh, I have lots to say. Not here. Because what I want to say is more transitional, I think. I think this is supposed to be reflective, right?
Yeah.
That's the purpose.
Yeah.
Like, I'm writing stuff down here of, like, transitional things. Because I think, like, the communications part, like, recognizing that it's a place where we fall off as finance board is good. And then writing down my thoughts now about, like, how it could possibly be transitioned, like, in my role. I think that's, like, how we should focus. You know what I mean? Like, think in your own position, like, what should this kind of role be doing to address this problem?
Yeah.
Sorry, that's just, I have, like, idea. I was, like, trying to focus.
No, sorry.
No, you're okay.
I would love to hear from some of the members of finance board who haven't spoken yet. So I'm just blown with that because oftentimes these discussions are among a certain group of people, and that's not reflective of the whole finance board.
I think there are good things to say, but I would just like to say that we're a little bit over time at the moment. And I know usually that's not a concern of mine, but I have other concerns at the moment, so sorry.
Do you have any other things that were?
I mean, we don't have any clubs coming in from here on, so I think this is an issue that could be brought up in the next meeting since we still have to come to future meetings. We have more meetings to come to just this one.
Okay. I think we should definitely start talking about transitioning a little bit more tonight, given that the elections will end tomorrow and like the new board will be announced on Friday, right? So talking about transitioning before, I guess, well, the new board wouldn't be like initiated until May 15th. I think we should start, I guess, transition and talking about transitioning. Go ahead, Hannah.
I was just going to say that I think Michael brings up a good point because we can use.
Can we bring them in the next meeting?
We have 2 more meetings. So we've got a May 1st meeting and we got a May 8th meeting. And I was talking to Megan before this meeting, and kind of my plan was to ask during announcements if anyone had any ideas on what we should do for the next meeting. But I think it might be more conducive for me to just like take some time and plan out like strategically how we should come up with a transition plan and use all of next week's time to create a transition plan and then invite the elected members to the May 8th meeting and run through that use that transition
Okay.
in whatever format we create next season.
Yeah, I love that. Megan, Ms. Josh.
This is a thought for Pass the Gavel. I'd like to hear from like everybody, like the good, the bad, the ugly about finance board this year. I think that'd be a good way to do Pass the Gavel as like a continuation of the reflection. Because I don't feel like we've reflected. I feel like we jumped all over them. We slightly reflected. We had like meta conversations about like how we're going to address communication, which is a huge cultural issue at UBC and ultimately in our world about how we communicate with others and how we get messages out there. Which is like good, but like sometimes we try to solve the problems of the world in finance board, which isn't always feasible. And I don't feel like I finished reflecting about this year in finance board. So I think that'd be cool to hear from everybody and Pass the Gavel, because I feel like that's like a more intimate setting in some ways. I don't know.
My question, so the first one's simple. Is this your like end of semester reflection meeting, like the actual one? Or are you waiting to next meeting?
We've never had one before. I wanted to just take this time to reflect, because I was initially hoping more of like, that if like the new finance programs were available, they would be able to come in next week, which I know is like very quick turnaround, I guess, for them. Which is why I wanted to take this time to reflect. But like I'm definitely willing to take a lot more time next meeting. We want to spend that whole time reflecting, because that gives us a lot more time and space to like really think and like formulate an actual reflection, as opposed to like this kind of not really on the fly, but I almost said yesterday about this, but really giving you guys the space.
And then my second point was that, my second question, I didn't know finance board. I come from a Senate background, obviously. Right. We have reflections every semester, so it's just like, I did not know that. My second question is, assuming that, I think this is a safe assumption, that we will have some requests to consider for summer and beginning of next semester, right?
No, today was the deadline for summer.
And there were no submissions.
That's right.
I can double check, but no.
And the reason I say that is usually because mock trial is the first request of the year, asking for their license for the next year. So if you can,
LGBTQ student union wanted to do stuff in POP, but I think
May sometime.
No, they went. No, that's their drag. We're talking about the drag.
The class that I saw was for May sometime.
So yeah, so there are a couple things that are outstanding. We can. Someone reach out to mock trial, because I want to make sure that they get their license for next year to like operate and get a script. But like also like
I'm not really sure what we could do with that.
Yeah, I have no idea. Is today's the hard firm deadline?
Yeah.
5:30. Oh, darn.
And I'm looking at the like, I don't know what to call the account, but the account where I can see all the requests that were submitted. And right now I see something from LGBTQ that was submitted today at 2, but the date is May 29th.
Okay.
For the date for the event is May 29th. And then something from the 21st that they initiated a document but they didn't fill it out.
Well.
And then there were organizations that submitted after April 10th, and I mentioned at the beginning of the meeting that that was supposed to be the deadline, but it wasn't communicated, and we switched it to the 17th. So any organization that submitted at that time, I had been telling them that the date had passed, but once we realized that information wasn't communicated, I reached back out to them. And of the organizations that did respond, meaning that not all of them responded, they had said that they had canceled their event and they weren't interested in pursuing funding.
Okay.
And as of now, it's been a week since I sent that email, and there's still organizations that haven't responded yet. So
okay.
I guess potentially, but it's also been a week, so if it meant that much to them, I feel like they would have responded to the email.
I see where you're coming from. I guess that the challenge is that I don't remember. Maybe I'm wrong, but like I don't think an email like that has ever been sent out, like firm deadline for for the beginning of next semester requests. And like,
no, every year.
They have every year. Okay,
because it's the end of the fiscal year, so we have to start some type of deadline, right?
Okay.
We can't just have like rolling admission for.
Okay, I just never heard of it. I don't know. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I can forward to you.
Yeah, if you could, that would be great. I don't get organization email anymore, y'all. I haven't gotten them sent. I have not gotten an email from like.
The MailChimp?
Yeah, I've not gotten one of those emails since the middle of the semester.
I think I might even have one from last year. I'll talk to Caitlin.
We stuck the post-its on the wall, but we didn't do anything with that reflection. I feel disappointed that we didn't evaluate what we did against our goals. That evaluation probably wouldn't have been particularly flattering, but it would have been worth doing considering we did set those goals.
So I'm just like worried that it's just going to be like a silence and then someone reads something and then we talk about it for 15 minutes, silence, someone reads something and we talk about it for 15 minutes and then we'll be here until 11 p.m. So if I can just like get all of this information and make like a structured reflection, or I mean, I feel like this is kind of part of transitioning too. This is like back outside work that needs to be done so we can have like an effective meeting next week.
I feel like we've also like unknowingly touched a lot on everything that's probably been written down here. Well, not necessarily. Look so hard at them. Like some of the things. Okay, so yeah, I think that'd be great if we could spend next week's meeting figuring out a more effective transitioning strategy, and hopefully being able, hopefully inviting the new finance board members to the May 8th meeting, so that we can like successfully, or at least somewhat successfully, compared to your past, transition, fill the knowledge gap, and help transition into board members for those who can attend, which might be another issue with that. Yes, Kumar?
How did it work in years past? How did the transition work?
I'm sure I've really gotten this one practically. What exactly happened at the end of last year?
Like how did the 2016, 2017 work?
There was no transition.
It wasn't really a transition. It was like, we might have been invited to a finance board meeting at the end of the year just to get a glimpse of what it was, but there was no official sit down between like there was a presentation made. There was a presentation made about reflection upon the 2016-2017 year and what that board had noted, and I think that may have been presented to some of the incoming board members who attended the finance board meeting at the end of last year, but other than that, there was no like official kind of welcome transition.
An expectation.
If I'm misremembering that, David.
No, I think that's right. You're going to have the same challenge with incoming finance board members that you do with student organizations, right? You've got knowledge accumulated through a year of work that you now want to pass on, but none of it's going to make sense to someone who's never experienced what you've experienced, and yet you're going to want to share it anyway. So I think part of the next meeting has got to be thinking about, right, how, for people who are going to need to know this is what the student activity fee is, and this is the whole concept of what the finance board does. How do you start to ground them in this reality and then empower them to make some good choices?
The presentation?
I have a few thoughts. The first is, I remember coming to that meeting, the fateful day after being elected, and it feeling a bit unwelcoming, particularly because that election was very hot, very hot, right? So thankfully we don't have to deal with that this year. And whenever finance board meets in this room, it's like just it can be very intimidating, I think, especially for new folks who might be walking in and it's their first time here. So I think as much as we want to have them in the room to see what it feels like, I would also highly, highly, highly push and suggest for a meeting somewhere else as more of like a mix, like a mix and mingle
on that day. Like, say, like, after, you know, the announcements on Friday, say it's highly encouraged for you to come this following Tuesday, whatever it is, the 30th or whatever, 31st, May 1st.
What is?
No, this coming week. What day
May
is it?
1st.
Next meeting is May 1st.
Yeah.
Well, if they come May 1st, even if they're just listening, that, you know, they, just so they know what it's like in the room, maybe, if they want to, and then do them, and then go somewhere else, or, you know, like, I don't know, it just, it just would be, I think, a little bit better.
I agree on the like mix and mingle concept, but also on the note of how to portray like incidences that have happened the past year and to like relay that importance and significance for conversation, what that actually looks like. And this might be even more of a summer thing if we have the ability to like download a couple of live stream videos and like select certain conversations and put that together in more of a video and have like new members like analyze or like what could we do better, what was like, what could we do better, what was good, those sorts of things, and have them have a discussion with that.
Well, like, this is good. That's good. Somebody needs to commit to doing that, because that's an issue with finance board, is that people say things in meetings, and I talked about this with Romy a lot, and it never got done. And that's a huge problem with finance board this year. We had great conversations, and people never went and did things. Like, we talked about the handouts for weeks, and nobody did it. We gotta, like, take action. Like, if that's something you think should be done, like, do you mind spearheading it? You know what I mean? Or, like,
you have a downloaded cut and I'm there.
yeah, you know what I mean? Like, I think that's something that finance board needs to take hold of next year, is like having an idea and like taking responsibility for it. Because if we keep talking, things don't do it. And that's a huge problem that we have this year.
I like the idea of like doing a mingling session, and something that I definitely am gonna tell the future president or whoever is booking the rooms for finance board is to change the room. So maybe we can have it in the room that we're going to change this room. And I think the Senate should move into one of Flat Tuesdays, because that one day that they had there was like a pretty good, like, regular students coming in. But I really would prefer if next meeting it's just us planning an effective transition and not having whoever's elected. I'm just not sure like if that would be conducive. It would probably be like more destructive, because we would be using jargon and having to like spend time like backtracking and explaining what things mean, and it just, I'd much rather just use that time to be like as efficiently as possible, like planning an effective transition. And I think that we have a lot of capable individuals in the room that would be able to voice an opinion. Like, this wouldn't make sense to someone walking in right off the street, because
yeah, no, that's fair. That was just kind of my like previous thinking of like what would happen after. Yeah, I think definitely having them come to May, maybe like a formal presentation or a formal transition activity presentation would be definitely most beneficial. No?
I think we get focused on a one and done thing and call that transition and then say that it's done after that. I think transition is something that's going to be happening throughout the entirety of next year. What I would expect, and at least of myself, I would hope that the finance board would follow in this sort of mold, is the idea of being available for next year's finance board, showing up in the if nothing else at the live stream and commenting and letting new finance board members know, hey, I was in this situation last year, I see you did this thing, this is what I did, hope it helps. Because a presentation is going to be processed by a certain kind of person, but not everyone learns best from a PowerPoint. And we know that. And when you're coming in on the wave of, wow, the student body has imbued me with this position, and they haven't imbued these people with that position now, why should I listen to them? That is, at least looking at the candidates that have been there, that is not all of the candidates, but that is some of them, and I think the lessons that we have learned in a year will not be passed on in their entirety in an hour or 2 hours or 3 hours of transition time. And that long tail of knowledge acquisition is just as important. It was expected, to my understanding, that many outgoing SGA officers would come to retreats, the between semester retreat for forming the new SGA. That may be a place where that might be useful, not being there the whole time, but at least showing up and being able to provide feedback to the incoming SGA. That might be something to think about.
Which retreat? The summer retreat?
Yeah.
I think you guys have already kind of started transitioning. Like last week, Carly sent an email saying, hey, you're running for finance board, come to the meeting so you learn what's happening proactively. So I think there also has to be an initiative on the incoming members to actually come to the meetings. And the incoming finance board will have, I think, 3 members that are already currently on it, so they all have that full of experience already. So.
I'd say statistically at least 2. I'm just saying nothing's guaranteed in anything.
And thank you for coming out so like the past 2 meetings. I hope you've learned a lot from our discussions, how we're going on. And though it may not seem like it makes any sense out of context, it may build context. Yeah, exactly. Build context. But yeah. So, other things, I guess, about that. And Hannah, I'd like to work with you, like figuring out what the transition kind of activities
I'm going to go through the post-it notes and transfer it to a Google Doc and just make a checklist and summarize what I think we have accomplished and what we haven't, if anyone has anything like contingent with what I come up with. We can voice it during the meeting. And then outside of that, I would say like for next week, reflect on like this question and like have things to answer, because I'm planning on just doing like round robin, everyone respond. So think of some things that you wish you would have known on your first meeting.
I feel like when you first come into the finance board, you feel powerless because the whole thing's so complicated. You don't know what's going on or what your role is. And then you work through and get to the end of the year and you feel powerless because there's so much that is broken and needs fixed and people don't behave the way you need them to, and it seems like it's going to take years to overcome it. And I don't feel disempowered for you, but I think that for new people coming in to have a sense that some of these things can be changed through their hard work, to make them want to commit to doing that work, it's going to be important that they not read all of you as kind of broken and dispirited. So I think it would be helpful if some of the questions that you ask people to respond to next week are things like, what opportunities do you see for the year ahead? What growth can we build on? And what could we call upon campus partners to help with that we haven't had their help with this year, but it would be great to have their help with next year, for example.
Questions for ourselves?
Yeah. I mean, these are questions that it would be helpful for you all to reflect on now that you're at the point of your greatest knowledge anyway. But I also think, I'm saying just frame some of your questions so that they're going to elicit hopeful, looking ahead kind of information and not just, well, here's another thing that, that people don't do the way they want. They should.
Yes, for the development of conversation, if it's possible, can you see some of that with people?
Yeah, I'll try.
Yeah, okay. Oh. Or even like just creating.
Yeah, I think I already have answers.
Like transition questions?
Yeah, like things we were talking about to facilitate what things that we want to discuss during transition. how would that information be relevant for a new member of the finance board? Like, but maybe that's not something that they need during this transition. Maybe it's something they see next semester. I don't
think they're going to be able to make complete sense of it yet.
Right. So.
Right. But this is also your last moment to share these thoughts that you're in a position to have with them, not yet. So, and mainly I'm saying this because I think if people are in the room, it's going to be helpful for them to see you as still being able to look ahead and not just sort of venting the frustrations that you can't do anything about anymore.
Okay. So letting them know that we're looking forward and not expecting them
maybe planting the seeds of ideas too.
Planting the seeds of ideas, I think coming in like optimistic that like we've started off on a good foundation and like we know that you can just keep building. Like what's the saying about that? I don't know. And maybe talking about what are like concrete action items that they can do in their first few months so they can meet together as a board over the summer, even just informally, because I think there's like you walk into finance board feeling powerless because you don't know anybody, or you might have like not great relationships with them, or you don't like, you know what I mean? And like getting to know each other like on an outside, like what happens at the retreat, that like bonding, if it were to happen earlier, I think it might be more beneficial to breaking the ice in finance board, because if people in finance board feel comfortable with each other, which we saw this semester, I think in particular, just simply like due to time, there's better conversation, and it's not always as hostile.
The issue with that is like, it's like how do you build like that community early on, and like that. I agree with you wholeheartedly. Other people would agree with you too. I can we can have that discussion offline. Like people in upper administration, but like it's a challenge.
It's hard. It's not impossible. It's not.
I'm not saying it's impossible.
Yeah, we had a Google Hangout in the beginning in the summer, and all of the finance board members at the time were in attendance, and we had like constructive-ish conversations. Like with that conversation, that is how I based most of the information that I relayed in treasurer training, because I okayed it with everyone that we were like going with compostable goods. We were going to consider a request, which we didn't actually do, and more favorably if they had been fundraising, if they had been collaborating, which is all information that I like included in the checklist that I gave out of treasurer training.
Yeah.
But I think the informal, like getting to know each other that like him and I did, that I did with you, Josh, that like we all four did, I think was different this year than it had been in years past.
Yes.
And it helped us work better as a team, I would argue. You know what I mean? We were able to get to know each other quicker. Like that's possible too for the finance board. Just to say like, hey everybody, like we're gonna meet at Starbucks, like it's just very casual. Like surely there's a date where most people can come. It's only like 7 people. It's not like coordinating the whole SGA.
Yes.
That's a feat, right? That's a hard thing. But like this is a small body, and like the sooner that it becomes cohesive, the better it is, I think. Okay.
3:31 is available.
I might be able to.
Or like any other room.
Because I have that down to 8 hours.
I'm not
Through the 8th.
The 8th, yeah.
Okay.
But I wonder
We need a room that can fit up to 20 people, right?
No, I just want for this like transition. So that's geographically close to David. It's like the SOC room available.
The SOC.
That's 3:30 or 3:29.
3:32.
Okay, so we're saying May 1st.
No, this is for May 1st, so that we can have a smaller like, roundtable discussion for the transitioning. Because I think one of the reasons why we didn't reflect on it because this is a weird structure.
What time did we want it
The financial type.
The search is not so full.
That's okay. I can send an email to Rebecca and Shelby about this and about the mix and mingle for a different night.
Yeah. Be careful, since SGA already has a reservation of this room for that time, that needs to be handled carefully. Right?
We can cancel our reservation.
We could
careful just to cancel for the one day. That's right.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. What if we had in the SGA office this week?
That's a lot easier to handle.
It's a lot of people in that office. I don't have a problem with it, but I remember we've had meetings in there in the past and it's been stressful because
my understanding is you just want to have a finance board only discussion, right?
Yeah. I know.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's everybody here.
Oh, so it's just the 7 people?
I mean, it's not a closed meeting.
Yeah.
But it's just, I mean, we can advertise it. We can say we're going to be discussing transition in the SGA office. I think that's reasonable.
But we don't want transitioning members to come. So.
Well, we're not necessarily saying you're not invited. We're just saying it's not going to be a time when we're going through how you'll be trained, how exactly you can do these action items. It's how we're preparing the transition you in the following meeting.
We could get lower flat Tuesdays.
So for your confused face, what it means is that next week it's going to be finance board members thinking about how do we transmit the knowledge that we have to you, because we have a lot of knowledge about all these processes and what's going to work best. Do we put this in a manual? Do we do this in a slideshow? Is it one-on-one conversations? What exactly do we need to pass on to you? Like, there are people running for election right now who think that like funding is allocated from a randomized 3-person board for high executive positions in SGA. It's a huge issue. People don't know what finance board does. And so we need to figure out how we explain that to the new incoming board.
So is it going to be here or somewhere else? Am I allowed to come next week?
We haven't decided that. We haven't decided where it is yet. That's what we're talking about right now.
Okay.
The meetings are open soon.
Yeah.
No, let's just do it in the office.
Okay.
Right.
But then we still have to go room for later.
For the 8th?
So next week's transitioning meeting, or transitioning planning meeting in the office.
Yeah, because that in the office is not. What if we communicated to all of them? Isn't there like a report posted like if there were a change of time or a change in location? Because I know for like the special meeting I had to send out like this week, to people about like this is when stuff. Would that have to be like the same thing for changing locations?
I mean, if you wanted 328, we can ask the Commons whether they'll, and we believe you, whether they'll swap, because they only need the meeting, they need a room for an hour at 7 o'clock. And we could probably swap with them for 318. 328, it looks like
I feel like doing the planning and transition meeting would be cool in the SJ office.
Yeah, for employment meeting.
No, this is for May 1st. Planning
Oh,
and
I was
transition.
talking about for May.
You're talking about for the 8th? We haven't gotten there yet. I thought we said Rebecca and Shelby was gonna do it.
Yeah,
we were gonna take suggestions and then have Rebecca and Shelby do it.
Yeah.
Because like that's their
But
position.
you can book the office now.
Yeah.
give me a second, I can put it on the calendar.
Is this meeting going to be after elections are finalized?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so elections are finalized Friday.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you want finance board meeting in Commons to be 20 on May 1st?
Yes.
Okay.
Should we still get to this one?
That is booked.
Yep.
I can send the email to cancel the reservation specifically for this day.
I got it.
You got it?
Yeah.
Do you have an email about the deadline?
Yes, I did. I didn't see it in the newsletter. That's why.
That's what that was there too.
Okay.
Yeah, it was supposed to be in the newsletter, but it wasn't included in the newsletter. So Caitlin sent
an email from you on April 17th.
From you?
Yeah.
Hold on, let me, okay, I just had
Okay. Is there anything else, I guess, that we need to cover next week or week after?
So it sounds like we have a room. So we know for certain that the transitioning planning meeting is happening May 1st, a week from today, in the SGA office, regular finance more times. Something will need to be sent out, and Josh is handling canceling the reservation for PCS. We still need to figure out a room for May 8th, but that'll just be sent. I can send an email and include all finance board and send it to like Shelby or Rebecca to ask them to look at a room. Ideally, that's more conducive to discussion and possibly make some legal. Tanya is going to work on clips to help transition. So is Carly and Hannah are going to work on like documents for transitioning. Is that the process we're keeping with that next week? I would say like start working on it to have like a rough idea of what could happen.
I'm sorry, Hannah. You said Caitlin sent it out by as you or?
I don't. When she does that.
I'll send you the email, Josh.
She sends out MailChimp like under our names.
Yeah, I'm looking for it. Because someone responded to it and was like, I didn't recognize this. Like at whatever. I wanted to make sure it was from you.
Yeah. Okay.
So I'm sure that it went out.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So since all this is to be handled and will be taken care of kind of outside of the meeting, are there any other points now or can you?
We still have to approve the meeting minutes.
Oh, that's what I was thinking. Okay. Yeah.
Thumbs up. Has everyone read the change?
What was the change?
Mainly mentioned eligibility, but that wasn't mentioned.
How many thumbs up? 7. Yeah.
Everyone.
Okay.
I think it was finance board budget updates. Was that the subject line there?
Finance board budget updates. Yeah, I found it. I can.
You got it. Okay.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it says, as of today, the finance board will no longer be accepting additional allocation requests for activities taking place between now and June 30th. If your organization plans to complete a project or event between July 1st and September 15th, the date for you to submit requests to the SGA Finance Board is April 24th, 2018 at 5:30 p.m.
Okay.
Okay. All right. So I recognize Hannah, Tanya, Kunal, Megan, Daniel, and Michael. So for present. Adrian's video, 8:36. Okay, let's.
You trust the light.
Okay.